Chapter 2140. Meng Qingxue turned pale with fright. It was also at this time that Mu Yanqing revealed his identity to her. It was only then that she realized that the man she had been dating for 2 years was not Xiao Kai. He actually had such a noble background. However, Mu Yanqing's words were undoubtedly heartbreaking. Initially, she loved Mu Yanqing more than she relied on him for material things. However, now that he had said this, her heart was instantly crushed and she fell into a state of despair. It turned out that this man was not with her because he loved her. He said that he liked her. But what was the real reason? At the end of the day, did this man not love her the most? But speaking of which, wasn't this to be expected? Love could be cultivated. Humans were selfish creatures. Anyway, people would love themselves the most, so they would fall in love with someone who could satisfy their desires. From then on, Meng Qingxue kept telling herself to be indifferent to love. While she was still young, she should work hard to get what she wanted. But in the end, she could not let go. It had been 2 years. She was deeply in love with Mu Yanqing and could not bear to part with him. She really loved this man passionately. She clearly saw through his scumbag nature, but she seemed to have been bewitched and hypnotized. Like a moth flying into a flame, she threw herself wholeheartedly into his heart. Mu Yanqing usually had high expectations of her. He had a serious obsession with cleanliness when it came to his women. Therefore, he repeatedly ordered her not to mingle in the modeling industry, not to mingle with other men, not to show her face in public, and not to reveal his identity. In addition, Mu Yanqing did not like to be controlled by others. He warned her not to call him unless it was something important. When he remembered or wanted to see her, he would naturally call her. As for her living expenses, he took care of them single-handedly. He gave her a bank card and told her the password. Every month, if he was in a good mood, her living expenses would be hundreds of thousands. This hundreds of thousands did not include those branded jewelry, bags, lipstick, and perfume. Meng Qingxue deeply felt that after that incident, it seemed that the two of them were in a relationship. No matter how she looked at it, she was like a caged canary, being kept as a mistress. She was deeply disgusted with this feeling. She was different from other materialistic women. She didn't have any wishful thinking about climbing up the social ladder. Compared to being rich, she preferred to marry an ordinary man who loved her wholeheartedly. When she first stepped into the young model circle, it was only because her family was poor. In addition, she had such innate conditions and was blessed by God, so she stepped into the young model circle. In the beginning, she was completely ignorant of the ways of the world, but when she saw all kinds of cruel unspoken rules, she had the intention to retreat. It was then that she met Mu Yanqing. She thought that it was a fated encounter. After they started dating, she basically didn't have to worry about food and clothing. However, in her free time, she still insisted on doing some part-time jobs, eager to support herself. Furthermore, she worked hard to learn how to cook and do household chores. Initially, she only knew the basics, but now, she was striving for perfection. She dreamed of being a good wife after marrying Mu Yanqing. That would be her biggest career in life. At that time, Mu Yanqing was still amazed. Chapter 2141. She was not the first woman he had kept as a mistress. When he first stepped into society, he had kept a few innocent girls as his mistress. Not to mention knowing his identity, when those girls saw how generous he was with his money, which one of them did not pester him for branded clothes, bags, diamonds, and other luxury goods? Even when they broke up with him, they would be ambitious and ask for sky-high compensation and breakup fees. This woman, though, was really strange. Despite him transferring hundreds of thousands of yuan to her every month, she was still living in an ordinary apartment building. She was dressed plainly and did not wear any branded clothes or carry an expensive bag. He heard that she had taken 2 separate jobs. Out of curiosity, he checked the bank account he had given her. After deducting the basic expenses such as rent, utilities, food, and clothing, there was almost nothing left for her to spend on her monthly living expenses. This woman. She's so different. On second thought, Mu Yanqing snorted disdainfully. She's probably doing this on purpose to win my favor, right? Suppressing her own desires, pretending to be a girl who didn't love power and wealth, pretending to be a virtuous girl who took care of the family, to please him and desperately want his approval? Is that possible? He was going to marry into a big family in the future. His wife would either be from a prestigious family, a wealthy family, or a scholarly family. There was no way out for him and such an ordinary woman. He was only interested in her beauty, her youth, and her gentleness. Other than that, he couldn't find any other reason to marry her. When he got tired of her, he would leave and give her a sum of money to keep her quiet. That would be the greatest kindness and consideration he could give to this woman. At 8 o'clock in the evening, Mu Yanqing showed up at the entrance of her rented apartment. Fengshan International's apartment building had been around for 8 years. It was not too shabby, but compared to the high-end apartments he had originally found for her, it was definitely quite shabby. As he walked into the elevator, the lights on the ceiling flickered on and off. It felt like a scene from a horror movie. On the 18th floor, Mu Yanqing walked out of the elevator and reached the door. Just as he was about to knock on it, his hand suddenly paused. This time, he was prepared to have a showdown with her. No matter the cost, he must cut off all ties with her. She had been with him for 2 years, and it could be said that she had given her best youth to him. In that case, he was not such a heartless person. This time, he would also promise her some benefits. These benefits were enough for her to buy a decent apartment in the capital, a luxury car, and the capital to not have to worry about food and clothing for 10 years. He had always been generous towards women. Moreover, it had been 2 years. It wasn't like he didn't have any feelings for her at all. If he wanted to break it off just like that, he would really be a little reluctant. He was not so free and easy that he would be stingy to see her one last time and just walk away. At the thought of this, he gently knocked on the door. Soon he heard footsteps coming from inside, followed by a woman's cautious voice. "Is it Yanqing?" He could hear the playfulness and anticipation in her voice, as well as a bit of vigilance. Chapter 2142. Therefore, she was very careful when dealing with strangers. However, when he heard such a gentle and joyful voice, Mu Yanqing's heart suddenly felt empty. Did she not know that he was here to have a showdown with her and break up with her? He hummed in acknowledgement. "Qingxue, it's me. Open the door." The door was quickly opened. As soon as he walked in and the door closed, Meng Qingxue threw herself into his arms, hooked her arms around the back of his neck, and kissed him on the lips. The kiss was so passionate and emotional that it infected Mu Yanqing instantly. He hugged her back and responded to her kiss. After the kiss, she snuggled into his arms and said in a slightly choked voice, "Yanqing, I miss you. I miss you so much." Her voice was filled with helplessness and attachment, so much so that Mu Yanqing, who was in a daze for a long time, actually wavered a little. He did not seem to want to break up with her completely. Through the cold phone call, he had originally planned this very well. When he entered and saw her, the first thing he should say was, "Let's break up." Then he would settle the accounts and give her a sizable breakup fee. From then on, they would not owe each other anything. Along the way, he was very determined. The words that he had rehearsed more than 10 times were stuck in his throat at this moment. Perhaps it was because, unlike the cold phone call, they had just met. Her soft and warm body was pressed tightly against his chest. He did not even need to exert much effort to feel the warmth of her skin. Such intimate contact instantly evoked his longing for her. Therefore, some words were not so easy to say. He still wanted her. It seemed that he could only become a sentimental man when he was with her. He also couldn't figure out what this woman was capable of. There were several times when he was affectionate with her, and he actually thought that whether they were married or not, he would keep her by his side. Even if he did not have a status, she could always be by his side. However, now was not the time at all. At least, before he got married, he should immediately break up with this woman. Alas, his physical needs gradually overcame his rationality. He kissed her passionately as he stripped her of her clothes. Every part of his body was screaming for her. Meng Qingxue pushed him away shyly and said coquettishly, "Yanqing, don't. I have something to tell you." "What is it? Isn't it better to talk about it in bed?" His ambiguous words made her heart skip a beat. Seeing that they were about to lose their position, Meng Qingxue immediately grabbed his hand. She used so much strength that the veins on the back of her hand almost popped out. He stared at her in surprise and stopped what he was doing. Frowning, he asked, "Why? You don't?" What he wanted was to at least spend some time with her before they broke up. It was the last time they made love. It wouldn't be too late to have a showdown with her after that. However, she seemed to be very resistant, and her face was full of reluctance. That's not like her. If it was in the past, she would be as passionate as fire at this moment. But now, he didn't seem to be in high spirits. "What is it?" Mu Yanqing stared at her. "You seem to be very resistant to me today." "It's not that." Meng Qingshue's face grew hotter. "I have something to tell you." "What is it?" Chapter 2143. Yanqing. Meng Qingxue bit her lower lip in a dilemma and then said shyly, "I'm pregnant." "I'm pregnant?" Mu Yanqing was stunned. He. Yun Shishir, I'm pregnant." At the same time, in a cafe in the city center, Song Enya was sitting in front of Yun Shishir with a smug look on her face. She was as proud as a victor as she announced to her with a smile, "I'm pregnant with Brother Mu's child." Yun Shishir looked at her expressionlessly. Song Enya's cruel words were like a curse that nailed her to the cross in an instant. After Song Enya's words, she instantly felt that the whole world had turned gray. Just a few hours ago, she was woken up by an unknown number. She was taking an afternoon nap, but when she was awakened by the urgent ringtone of her phone, she glanced at the screen and saw that it was a number that she had never dialed before. She picked up the call suspiciously and heard Song Enya's cold voice on the other end. "Yun Shishir." Yun Shishir immediately woke up from her drowsiness. "Song Enya?" She could tell at once that the Missy's voice was arrogant, contemptuous, and hostile. There was also an inexplicable sense of smugness in it. Yun Shishir sat up on the bed at once, her face turning frosty in an instant. "Song Enya, I heard that you went missing. Could it be that you've absconded because of your guilty conscience?" "Yun Shishir, I have something to announce to you." Song Enya was not in the mood to care about her ridicule. Instead, she issued a challenge to her. 8 o'clock tonight at Queen Cafe in the city center. Be there or be square. With that, she hung up the phone without any explanation. I wonder what tricks she's up to this time. Yun Shishir did not want to pay much attention to it at first, but at 7 o'clock in the evening, she was curious about what important things Song Enya had to announce to her. Looking at the date on the wall, she felt restless. She thought that since Song Enya had asked to meet her in the city center, there was no need to worry about what tricks she would play. Besides, she had a score to settle with her. Mu Yazhe went out early in the morning, saying that he had to discuss some important matters with a few of his men. It was already 7 o'clock, but he was not home. It seemed that he would not be back for dinner. Hence, Yun Shishir gave the two Xiaobaos a few reminders and hurriedly left. By the time she reached the cafe, Song Enya was already there and had sent her the name of a private room. When the waiter led her to the private room and pushed open the door, she saw a face that she had not seen in a long time. "Yun Shishir, you're here." Surprisingly, the Missy's face did not show much hostility when she saw her, which was rather unusual. If it was in the past, the moment he saw her, he would definitely gnash his teeth in hatred. His eyes would be as sharp as a poisonous snake, as if he couldn't wait to swallow her alive. It was different today, though. She smiled elegantly. Her eyes were clear, and her makeup was light. Unlike the heavy makeup she used to wear, her watery eyes and pink lips made her look very simple and elegant, but she was very charming. Song Enya was sitting at a table. When she saw her, she politely pointed to a seat and invited her to take a seat. This made her even more suspicious. Chapter 2144. However, the friendliness that Song Enya displayed on the surface made her seem like a completely different person. If it were not for that familiar face, she would really suspect that the woman in front of her was not Song Enya herself. "Have a seat." Yun Shishir did not stand on ceremony as she walked over and sat down opposite her. "You asked me to come here this time because, what would you like to drink?" Song Enya asked as she flipped through the menu. Yun Shishir's expression froze for a moment before she said, "A glass of Blue Mountain." Song Enya turned her head and immediately ordered, "A glass of Blue Mountain." The waiter nodded and then respectfully left the room. At this point, the private room fell into dead silence. As Song Enya stirred the warm milk, the rich fragrance of milk immediately filled the room. The two of them sat quietly in silence. Yun Shirshir sized her up silently. She did not know what she was up to at this moment, but she had a feeling that she had ulterior motives for inviting her here. This woman was extremely vicious. As the saying went, one's appearance was born from one's heart. In the past, she did not think that this saying made much sense, but it was vividly reflected in Song Enya. Thinking back to the past, her incomparably mean face gave people a feeling of disgust. Yun Shirshir was silent for a moment. Just as she was about to speak to break the silence, Song Enya, who was sitting opposite her, broke the silence first. She raised her head and looked at her like a victor. She blatantly announced to her, "Do you know? I'm pregnant." In the apartment, the atmosphere froze for a long time. Mu Yanqing looked at Meng Qingxue in disbelief, his eyes full of shock and bewilderment. Seeing his stunned expression, Meng Qingxue mistakenly thought that he was shocked because he could not face such a big surprise. Her face became even more shy, as if she had put on rouge and was boiling hot. She pouted and buried her face in his chest, asking in a coquettish tone, "Yanqing, are you unhappy? You're going to be a father soon." Perhaps it was because she was pregnant, but even though she was only 18 years old, the maternal instinct in her heart was already spreading because of the birth of a new life. Her face became softer than ever, and there was a holy and enchanting radiance about her. However, this kind of radiance was undoubtedly too dazzling to the point that it fiercely stung his eyes. For a moment, Mu Yanqing forgot to express his thoughts as he lowered his head and sized her up in a daze. Finally, his gaze landed on her still flat stomach. He was going to be a father soon. She was pregnant. How could this be? She even asked him if he was happy. How could he be happy? Right now, Meng Qingshue's joy and excitement formed a sharp contrast with his stunned and lifeless expression. Perhaps Meng Qingxue was too happy and immersed in the beautiful fantasy of the future, so she didn't care about his pale face at the moment. She pulled him to sit down on the sofa. Like a happy bird, she chattered to him, telling him the uneasiness and tension of being a mother for the first time, as well as her expectations and dreams for the arrival of the child in her belly. Chapter 2145. After all, Meng Qingxue was still young and did not understand what was wrong with her body. Hence, she hurriedly searched for relevant information on the internet and concluded that she might be pregnant. Meng Qingxue was nervous and uneasy. She went to the maternal and child health hospital for a series of checkups and finally got the result that she was 4 weeks pregnant. She was not prepared for the arrival of this child at all. That was because she was still so young, only 18 years old. Most girls of this age were still studying in school. Although she dropped out of school early because of her poor family background and entered society, she was only 18 years old after all. She was not mentally prepared at all. When the doctor saw her age and carefully asked where the child came from and if there was a need to abort it, she subconsciously refused. It was probably at that time when she saw the small shadow in the ultrasound that her maternal instincts could not help but stimulate her desire to protect her child. She used to hate children. Rather than saying that she hated them, it was more accurate to say that she rejected them. However, once she realized that she was about to become a mother, the joy she felt was indescribable. That was because she loved this man deeply, and the child in her stomach was their flesh and blood. Love the house, love the crow, and love for this child came from the bottom of her heart. She struggled with her thoughts for an entire night. She originally wanted to call him and ask for his opinion, but she remembered that he had said not to call and disturb his life unless it was especially important. After hesitating for a while, she put down her phone and finally decided to keep this a secret for the time being. It would not be too late to announce this to him when he arrived. It took her a few nights to adjust her state of mind. Meng Qingxue hugged him happily and said a lot of things excitedly. For example, she felt that her mentality had changed after she became pregnant. She also told him about her fantasies about the future. For example, after the child was born, she hoped that it would be a beautiful boy. However, if it looked like him, it would be good to give birth to a beautiful little princess. The customs in her hometown were used to favoring boys over girls. Meng Qingxue had experienced the persecution brought about by favoring boys over girls. Therefore, in her heart she would like both boys and girls. After all, this was his child. Finally, she leaned on his shoulder and suggested an idea. Yanqing, why don't we get married? Although she hadn't reached the legal age yet, in her hometown, many girls got married and had children at the age of 16 or 17. It wouldn't be too late to apply for a certificate when the children were older. The wedding could be held first. Meng Qingxue hoped that they could hold the wedding as soon as possible. Compared to being a mother, she hoped that she could hold his hand and step into the hall of marriage. This was something that she had always dreamed of. Meng Qingxue looked at him coquettishly. Her eyes were bright and clear, and her smile was brimming with happiness. It was as if she was certain that he would agree to this matter. Little did she know that Mu Yanqing had suddenly pried her hand away from his arm with an expressionless face and gave her a faint, mocking smile. Impossible! Meng Qingxue was stunned, and the smile on her face froze. She repeated his words in a daze. Impossible? Chapter 2146. The smile on Meng Qingxue's face completely froze. Her hand, which had been broken free, slipped onto the sofa, and she felt weak all over. Ignoring her disappointed expression, Mu Yanqing suddenly questioned her mercilessly, Meng Qingxue, are you kidding me? Impossible, impossible. How can you be pregnant? He was still in disbelief. How can this child be mine? Such a heartless and cold question was like a bolt from the blue to Meng Qingxue. It was as if her heart was being pierced by a needle, and it was bleeding profusely. How can this be? If this child isn't yours, who else can it be? She was almost crying as she questioned him back, tears streaming down her face. Mu Yanqing was touched by her tears. He was not without feelings for her. When he saw her crying and feeling dejected, his heart softened a little. Hence, his tone was no longer as cold and harsh as before. Instead, it softened a little. Haven't you been taking the pill? Like most men, he did not like to wear condoms, but he did not want to make any mistakes. Hence, he had been reminding her to take the pill. In the beginning, he even saw with his own eyes that she had taken the long-term contraceptive pill before he started having sex with her unscrupulously. Later on, she also promised him that no matter what, she would take the pill on time before doing so and would not cause him any trouble. He trusted her, so later on, he did not supervise her anymore. Haven't you been taking the contraceptive pill? Meng Qingxue lowered her eyelashes in disappointment and nodded weakly. Suspicion flashed across Mu Yanqing's eyes. Could it be that you stopped taking the pill? No. Meng Qingxue felt even more aggrieved. Her tears could not stop flowing. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she looked pitiful. I've never stopped taking the contraceptive pill. I've always kept my promise to you. Then, how can you be pregnant? Mu Yanqing's voice grew louder. His eyes narrowed as he cursed inwardly. Could it be that, while he was away, she had attracted another woman outside and accidentally got pregnant? He did not express his suspicions, but how could Meng Qingxue not understand the look in his eyes? That doubtful and hurtful look was undoubtedly heart-wrenching. She shoved his shoulder hard and broke down in despair. Are you suspecting that I've done something to let you down? He really didn't. So, don't look at me like that, okay? If you doubt me and don't believe me, I can do a paternity test with you. Mu Yanqing's heart softened, but at this moment his heart was in a mess. Even if he wanted to care about her feelings, he could not help it. He almost blurted out the next sentence, which was almost heartless. Qingxue, don't tell me that you used some unspeakable means to get pregnant with this child? Or did you secretly use those means to get pregnant with this child so that you can blackmail me into marrying you grandly and live a carefree life as a rich madam? The medical industry under the Mu family's name was vast. Furthermore, they had a private sperm bank that belonged exclusively to the Muse. This was a confidential and forbidden area that kept the sperm of several generations of the Muse. Chapter 2147. When Mu Yanqing was 18 years old, he had already frozen a batch of sperm. When he was 24 years old, he froze another batch of sperm of even better quality. He could not help but suspect that this woman had paid a price and used some tricks to conceive his child through artificial insemination. However, it was no wonder that Mu Yenqing would suspect such a conspiracy theory. Being born into a rich and powerful family like the Mu family, there were countless schemes and schemes. It was not as if no woman had resorted to such means before, so he was no longer surprised by it. After all, being born into such a family, such things were not uncommon. Hence, it was only natural that they would suspect Meng Qingxue. At first, Meng Qingxue did not understand what he meant. She widened her eyes and stared at him innocently. Yenqing, what do you mean by that? Don't play dumb. You should know what I mean. Mu Yenqing suddenly laughed coldly. Don't tell me you're pregnant with my child through artificial insemination. Meng Qingxue was stunned. She was surprised that there was such a way to get pregnant. Moreover, what was even more heartbreaking was that the man she loved so deeply actually suspected her of such a sinister scheme. When Meng Qingxue came back to her senses, her face was already wet with tears. Her heart was in unbearable pain as she said aggrievedly, "You actually suspect me of having sinister intentions. Yenqing, it's been so long, almost 3 years. We've been together for so long, but you've never believed me, have you?" She had always thought that as long as she maintained her original heart, was sincere enough, he would be able to understand her good intentions for him. All along, she had never asked for anything from him. Even if she was sometimes in financial straits, she had never thought of using him. Every month, he would transfer money to the account, but that little money was only taken out as a last resort for daily expenses. Basically, he had never squandered it. Most girls of her age wore beautiful clothes, branded bags, and exquisite makeup. However, she was the only one who wore no makeup and dressed simply. Even if it was ordinary skincare products, she would save as much as possible. When she first stepped into the modeling industry, she had a few close friends. But ever since she got pregnant with him, they had drifted apart and never contacted each other again. She was like a lonely person, silently living in a place that he had forgotten. In order to live with dignity, she had long exhausted all her strength. She thought that by doing this for him to see, he would be able to see her true feelings for him, pure and without a trace of impurity. Who didn't dream of being rich and powerful? In the past, all of her sisters in the modeling industry had advised her to leave this fickle man and find someone else. With her qualifications, it was not a difficult thing to find a man who would love and care for her in the palm of his hand. However, she had never expected that her sincere efforts, which were unknown to the public, would not only fail to move his heart of stone, but also cause him to make such conjectures. If she had such a scheming mind, she wouldn't be in such dire straits. But why couldn't this man understand her heart? In the end, it was because he didn't love her enough. Therefore, he couldn't empathize with her feelings. Chapter 2148. Yenqing, I love you. In order to love you properly, I've stopped touching the things that you hate and dislike. I've worked hard to work part-time and earn money to support myself. I want to let you know that I'm an independent woman who doesn't covet your wealth. But my family isn't well-to-do. I came out into society before I finished my studies. Reality is cruel, and I can't find a decent job at all. Even so, I still fantasize about becoming more outstanding. Sometimes, I really wish that you were an ordinary man and didn't have such a good family background. At least, when I'm giving my heart to you, don't use such vicious thoughts to judge me. Meng Qingxue spoke from the bottom of her heart as tears streamed down her face. Mu Yenqing's heart softened in the end. However, he was puzzled. If she wasn't coveting his wealth, what exactly was so good about him that she was willing to pour her heart out for him? Growing up in such a family, like everyone else, he was incomparably insecure. Therefore, he was unscrupulous in climbing up the social ladder. This was because he understood that only power and wealth could give him a pitiful sense of security. Meng Qingxue said, "Other than the basic daily expenses, I haven't used much of the money from the account you transferred to me. Of course, you don't have to worry about me being hypocritical and casting a long line to catch a big fish. You may think that I'm very greedy, but I'm not. I'm not. Please, don't say such hurtful words again. I just want to be with you." Is that wrong? The last sentence was almost shouted out hysterically. Mu Yanqing sucked in a deep breath of cold air and hugged her tightly. Qingxue, I'm sorry. Don't say any more. I know. After a pause, he helped her to the sofa and sat down. After calming down, he casually picked up an apple from the table and peeled it for her while saying, Actually, I came over tonight because I have something to tell you. Meng Qingxue was heartbroken. As if a fishbone was stuck in her throat, she could not say a word and could only sob. However, she heard him say lightly, My family is planning to arrange a marriage for me. Second uncle ordered me to cut ties with you cleanly and prepare to accept the marriage. I came here this time to break up with you. Hearing this, Meng Qingxue felt suffocated. She cried out in grief, but her tears flowed even more violently. Mu Yanqing recounted his uncle's instructions to him and then changed the topic helplessly. But the truth is, I do have feelings for you. On the way here, I swore that I'd make a clean break with you this time. But when I came here and saw you, in the end, I was unable to bear it. Meng Qingxue's heart warmed at his words, and her face lit up like a radiant sunflower. Mu Yanqing's next words, however, plunged her into despair. Chapter 2149. In the future, if he's successful, I'll bring him back to the Mu family. You, on the other hand, may never have a proper status, but you don't have to worry about me mistreating you. I'll still promise you the glory and wealth that belongs to you. Second uncle's intention in arranging this marriage is to strengthen my power and support me to become the head of the Mu family. Once I become the head of the family, even if you give birth to a few more children, I'll still be able to bear the responsibility, let alone one. Don't worry, other than a proper status, I'll give you everything you want. Meng Qingxue leaned on him, feeling empty as she listened to him describe the blueprint for the future. Mu Yanqing calmed down at once. It was not that he did not expect the pregnancy. It was not that he could not afford to raise a child. His earlier agitation was just that he was not mentally prepared for it. The Mu family had always placed importance on descendants. Mu Linfeng originally wanted him to cut off all ties with Meng Qingxue, but if they had a child, things might be different. He could find a way to settle Meng Qingxue in a quiet, high-end neighborhood where she could nurture the fetus. After the child was born, he could assign a few nannies and a few confinement matrons to raise the child. It was not a big deal to have a few mistresses outside. It was not that the Mu family did not allow such a situation to exist. Moreover, as long as the family's descendants were capable enough, they would acknowledge it. Despite Mu Linfeng's appearance, he also had an illegitimate child outside. It was just that the children under him were disappointing and could not be brought into the family. It was just that he did not want Meng Qingxue's existence to interfere with his future ambitions in any way. Mu Yanqing also promised her that, although she could not replace his fiancé status, as long as the child was born, they would still be like how they were now. He would often come to her place to accompany her and the child. He also promised her that she would enjoy endless glory and wealth in the future. She would be very happy and would no longer have to work for others and be bullied by others. She would also no longer have to live in such a cramped rented house. She would move into a high-class apartment and be treated like a rich lady. She would be treated like the moon surrounded by a myriad of stars, waiting on and waiting on. Other than enjoying life and taking care of the child, she would not have to do anything at all. She would not have to worry about not having a job or being hungry. It could be said that other than her status, she was no different from those rich young mistresses. If she knew how to manage things well, it wouldn't be difficult for her to get along with the legal wife. As for the status, there was no need for him to harbor any hopes. If he became the head of the family and had some ability, he would be able to give her a better life. In his opinion, those superficial appearances were not that important anymore. Mu Yanqing thought to himself, I've already said so much and even laid out so many tempting conditions. A sensible woman would be overjoyed by now. She would be hugging my arm and coquettishly fawning on me. At least, that was what he thought. However, the moment he spoke, there was a long silence in the air. She still had her head lowered and did not say anything. However, her happy expression instantly darkened. Seeing that tears were about to fall again, he could not help but get angry. He impatiently asked, What do you want? What do you want? What a dignified question. He actually asked her what she wanted? Chapter 2150. Meng Qingxue threw caution to the wind and poured out all the displeasure in her heart. What do I want? I don't want what you've said. What I want is you. What do you mean? You don't understand me after all. I don't care about glory and wealth. I just want to be with you. I want to be your legitimate wife. As soon as she finished speaking, Mu Yanqing, I think you're really insatiably greedy. That's all I can promise you. Think about it carefully. I'm such a man. I have my ambitions and my pursuits. I won't allow anyone to be my stumbling block, including you. With that, he walked to the door. Meng Qingxue was stunned for a moment before she chased after him. She saw that Mu Yanqing had already opened the door and half of his long leg had stepped out. He suddenly paused and turned around to look at her coldly. He threw an extremely cruel sentence at her. If you've thought it through, give me a call. I'll arrange the rest for you. You just need to take care of your body, take care of the fetus, and give birth to the child without any worries. However, if you're unwilling to do so, then you can cut all ties with me. The child will either belong to me, or you can deal with the aftermath yourself. After he finished speaking, he slammed the door shut with a bang and left with a swagger. Meng Qingshue's heart ached terribly. She leaned against the door and fell to the ground in melancholy. Then she burst into tears at a cafe. After Song Enya arrogantly announced her pregnancy, Yun Shishir inexplicably calmed down. She did not panic for a moment. Instead, she was unusually calm. She was very surprised by Song Enya's announcement. On the way here, she had guessed Song Enya's motive for treating her to coffee. However, when she proudly told her that she was pregnant, Yun Shishir sneered. At this moment of dead silence, the waiter knocked on the door and came in with a tray. He placed a cup of Blue Mountain coffee in front of her and left. Yun Shishir quietly warmed her palms with the cup of coffee in her hand. She could feel its boiling temperature when she heard Song Enya's shrill and arrogant voice ringing in her ears once more. The child is already 3 weeks old. Brother Mu and I had it after he returned from Sea City. During that period of time, something must have happened between the two of you, right? That night, he was dead drunk. When I helped him into the room, he might have mistaken me for you. He hugged me and then that happened. She paused for a moment before smiling bitterly. I've always wanted Brother Mu, but I didn't expect that I'd end up becoming his woman because of you. However, it doesn't matter. Even if I can't get his body or his heart, I'll be satisfied even if he gives me a child. She smiled so brightly and proudly. In Yun Shishir's eyes, it was incomparably glaring. Even though she forced herself to calm down, her mind was still a mess. Returned from Sea City? At that time, Mu Yaja had indeed rushed back, but according to Qin Zhou, he had rushed back to the capital because of Song Enya's disappearance. She firmly believed in Mu Yaja. Chapter 2151. Furthermore, this man had always known how to control the situation at drinking gatherings. He had a sense of propriety when it came to alcohol and never allowed himself to lose his composure. It was impossible for him to get drunk. Song Enya sized up her expression and sneered mockingly. But you don't believe what I've said? Yun Shishir looked up and met her gaze. Song Enya continued, do you not believe that I'm pregnant? Or do you not believe that the fetus in my womb isn't Brother Mu's flesh and blood? Why should I believe you? Yun Shishir turned to smile, but her face was unusually tense. Song Enya, I see that you don't have any other abilities, but you're quite capable at sowing discord. Since you're pregnant, why didn't you tell him? Instead, you came to me to fan the flames. Do you have ulterior motives? Yun Shishir, I said that you're too inexperienced, but you still don't know it. I think you've never really understood men from the beginning to the end. Song Enya smiled and continued, men have always been creatures who think for themselves. Oftentimes, biological impulses and primal instincts will overcome all rationality. Although Brother Mu is a very charming man, he's ultimately not a god. He'll also make some mistakes that men will make. I love him, so I have to believe him without hesitation. Things are just excuses to comfort myself. Do you think I should believe you just because you say that? Song Enya, there's a limit to how shameless a person can be. You're from a prestigious family after all, so you don't have to lower yourself like this. Yun Shirshi's cold gaze pierced into her. Song Enya chuckled and provoked. If you don't believe me, you can go back and ask Brother Mu. I don't think Brother Mu would deny it, would he? However, if you really don't believe me, I can show you the evidence. As she spoke, she took out a craft paper bag from her bag and handed it over. Yun Shirshir did not reach out to take it, so Song Enya pushed the paper bag in front of her with an elegant smile. But aren't you going to open it? Or is your confidence wavering now and you don't dare to face the truth? How could Yun Shirshir ignore such a provocation? She opened the paper bag, took out a few reports, and skimmed through them. She didn't know how to read it. Then came the line at the end, confirmation of biological parentage between W6829F and W1993D. This line of words was simple and easy to understand. This meant that they were related by blood. Yun Shirshir narrowed her eyes suspiciously and looked up at her. Without waiting for her to raise her doubts, Song Enya smirked and said coldly, "You don't have to doubt the authenticity of this paternity report. It's stamped by an official hospital, so everything is based on evidence. If you don't believe me, you can take this report to the hospital to check if it's officially issued. If the child doubts me, I can just do it again." She appeared to be in the right and was not afraid of any form of verification. This undoubtedly extinguished the confidence in her heart. Chapter 2152. Last night, due to the sudden turn of events, Mu Yaja seemed to have a lot on his mind, so he smoked quite fiercely. Later, when a few of his brothers came over, she took the opportunity to find a lighter in his coat pocket and stuffed it into her pocket. She suddenly sneered and took out the lighter. Ding! She opened the lid and lit it with a puff. She picked up the report with one hand and set it on fire at a corner. Amid Song Enya's terrified shriek, the flame suddenly jumped up and caught fire. Yun Shirshir threw the burning document in front of Song Enya in a dashing manner. Song Enya gasped in shock and hurriedly poured the warm milk beside her on it. Accompanied by spirals of smoke, the flame was slowly extinguished. "You!" After Song Enya calmed down, she glared at her and questioned hysterically, "What exactly are you trying to do? You don't have to show me such things. Do you think that this can shake my so-called beliefs? Song Enya, don't take things for granted, you're too naive." Yun Shirshir coolly said this before she suddenly stood up and walked toward the door. Song Enya also stood up and chased after her aggressively. "Yun Shirshir, I'm warning you, you won't be smug for long. Tomorrow, I'll bring these paternity test reports to the Muse to seek justice for me. For the sake of the child, the Muse will definitely arrange a marriage between me and Brother Mu. I'll see who'll be the one in a sorry state then. You're so smug now, but you won't be for long." Yun Shirshir's back paused when she heard this. She calmly turned around and said, "Oh, then I'll wait and see." Her calm reply surprised Song Enya greatly. In order to have this child, she had paid an unimaginable price. During the difficult pregnancy, she had tried her best to adjust her body's condition. After the pregnancy was successful, she made some slight adjustments and flew back to the country without stopping. However, she did not look for Mu Yaja immediately. What was the use of looking for Brother Mu? She had used despicable means to obtain this child. Even if it was his flesh and blood, he might not necessarily acknowledge it. After resting for a while in a hotel in the capital, she went straight to provoke Yun Shirshir. Taking action from her would undoubtedly yield twice the result with half the effort. She had originally thought that when she told her everything, she might be suspicious. Therefore, she had prepared the paternity test in advance and was looking forward to throwing the report to her. Because of this, she would fly into a rage and rush home recklessly to cry and throw a tantrum with Brother Mu. She would vent her anger on him for all the grievances she had suffered. With Brother Mu's cold personality, it would be difficult for him to accept any doubts from the woman he loved deeply. The two of them would inevitably be estranged because of this. This was indeed a method to sow discord. She had set up a trap and was just waiting for Yun Shirshir to foolishly jump in and bury herself in it. After all, she had already brazenly provoked her. If it were any other woman, it would be difficult for them to remain calm. She did not believe that Yun Shirshir could remain calm. However, reality proved that Yun Shirshir was much more mature than she had imagined. Chapter 2153. Her carefree attitude made her turn pale with fright. Instead, it was her, the invader, who was flustered and unable to keep her cool. Song Enya suddenly sneered and forced herself to calm down quickly. Just wait and see then. When the Muse make the necessary arrangements, I'll have to trouble you to abdicate your position and settle the divorce procedures as soon as possible. Yun Shirshir suddenly fell silent. Song Enya thought that she was panicking, so she continued fanning the flames and fanning the flames. Why did you take things so hard back then? It's obvious that you and Brother Mu can't last long, yet you still shamelessly insisted on marrying him. Do you think that you can be together forever after getting married? You're really delusional. Yun Shirshir was obviously unmoved by her provocation. She was cold from the start to the end, but Song Enya completely ignored her indifference and continued. What happened in the end? Didn't I get kicked away by Brother Mu? When the time comes, the one who will truly be the matriarch of the Muse will be me. Yun Shirshir, however, raised a question. Matriarch of the Muse? Song Enya said smugly, why? Marrying Brother Mu, wouldn't that make her the rightful mistress of the Mu family? I'm more qualified than you. I come from a good family and have a superior background. Between us, the Muse will definitely side with me. The Song's influence isn't as simple as you think. With the help of the Song family, Brother Mu's future would be even brighter. What if he's with you though? He'll only attract more prejudiced gazes. Don't you know? You have a bad reputation in the Muse. Everyone laughs at you for being a broken shoe. If Brother Mu gets together with you, you'll only be a hindrance to him and drag him down. I, on the other hand, am different. I'll use my family's influence to help him climb to a higher peak. Yun Shirshir suddenly interrupted her passionate fantasy. Then I'll have to disappoint you. Song Enya was stunned for a moment, unable to react as she stared blankly at her. What do you mean? Yun Shirshir calmly said, he's no longer the head of the Muse. Song Enya's expression froze like ice. Yun Shirshir found her to be too laughable. She was just like a clown. Just as she was about to turn and leave, Song Enya angrily grabbed her hand and stopped her from leaving. What did you say? Brother Mu is no longer the head of the Muse? What do you mean? Yun Shirshir sneered contemptuously. Her next words were like a bucket of ice water splashed on her heart. It seems that you're not up to date with the latest news. I thought you should know that just last night, your brother Mu stepped down from his position as the head of the family and the CEO of the consortium in front of the elders of the Mu family. Sorry, I'm going to shatter your beautiful dream. Song Enya was stunned. She bit her lower lip hard. She had never expected such a situation to happen. Brother Mu had resigned as the head of the Muse. Why? Chapter 2154. But for some reason, he had suddenly resigned. Why was that? She could not figure it out. Her vicious gaze suddenly landed on Yun Shirshir as she questioned her suspiciously, It's you, isn't it? It's all because of you, isn't it? She yelled at her aggrievedly and angrily. Brother Mu stepped down because of you, right? Yun Shirshir pursed her lips and smiled, but she admitted it honestly. Her two words were light as a feather, but they pierced the Missy's heart like an awl. She was completely stunned. Brother Mu actually gave up his position as the head of the Mu family because of me. How could this be? What kind of charm does this woman have to make an ambitious man like Brother Mu give up on the Mu group? I don't believe it. But why did it turn out like this? Song Enya still found it hard to believe. She kept muttering to herself, but she could not get an answer. Yun Shirshir kindly explained, that's because the Muse wanted him to make a choice between the head of the family and me. That's why this is his choice. Are you satisfied with this answer? Seeing that Song Enya was completely stunned, Yun Shirshir did not have the mood to entertain her any longer. She flung her sleeve aside and left on her own. The door was slammed shut with a bang. Song Enya fell to the ground weakly. Her eyes were blank as she looked haggard and lost her soul. Why? Yun Shirshir started the car and sat in it. She looked at the rearview mirror and saw that her face was a little pale. She tidied her hair, which had been messed up by the wind, but she still could not sort out her frustrated emotions. It was not that she did not trust him enough. She believed that this man, who was bold and responsible enough to give up his power for her, would never do anything to let her down. What kind of opportunity did he have to make Song Enya pregnant with his child? She had actually read through the report seriously. Because of her experience, she had some understanding of such matters. Generally speaking, it was impossible to fake a personal appraisal, unless one was extremely powerful. Only then would they have the ability to do so. Besides, Song Enya had already said that they could do another paternity test at any time if they wanted to verify it. She did not look like she was lying. She was really pregnant with his child. The results of the comparison showed that there was indeed a personal relationship between them. She did not know what kind of tricks Song Enya had used, but the thought that the Missy was carrying her beloved man's child made her feel as if she had swallowed countless fish bones. It was as if a fishbone was stuck in her throat, and it was extremely painful. She might not be able to be that carefree. How could Yun Shirshir not guess her niece's motive? She wanted to get pregnant with his child. She wanted to use her to sow discord between them, thus creating a gap between them and driving a wedge between them. Naturally, she would not allow her to achieve her goal just like that. However, there were some things that just couldn't be understood. She was not strong enough to control her emotions at will. Yun Shirshir took a deep breath, grabbed the steering wheel, and stepped on the accelerator. When she reached home and opened the door, she saw Mu Yaja sitting on the sofa with his head lowered, flipping through the newspaper. Chapter 2155. After returning from Xingyu Financial Group and reaching home, the two little lads said that their mommy had left in a hurry. He called her and found out that she was on her way back. After giving her a few reminders, he sat back on the sofa and flipped through the financial newspaper he had just bought. As expected, an entire day had passed, and there was no news from the Mu Group. Perhaps the public relations department was preparing anxiously. Perhaps tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, the Mu Group would probably send out an official announcement of his resignation. Mu Linfeng was probably in a terrible state now. Dealing with it in such a way could minimize the negative impact of this matter. This was what he had to worry about now. At this moment he was probably gnashing his teeth in hatred. Mu Yaja heard the sound of the door opening and saw that a certain little woman had finally returned home. He smiled and said, "Why are you so late?" Yun Shirshir stood at the door, but she was not elated by his usual greeting. She leaned against the door and casually placed the car keys on the table. Thus, she leaned against the door and lowered her head, looking a little lonely and powerless. At this moment, her state could be described as gloomy. With her head lowered and her frown, Mu Yaja was also confused. He did not know what this little woman had gone through outside to come back with a stomach full of anger. But in reality? Along the way, she comforted herself, but she still could not figure it out. Even in front of Song Enya, she was arrogant and merciless in her ridicule. But when she turned around and was alone, she could not comfort her state of mind. On one hand, she could stand in Mu Yaja's position and repeatedly tell herself that he would not betray her. On the other hand, when she thought about how Song Enya was pregnant with his child, she felt sad and even jealous. There was a part of her that felt unbalanced in her heart. At the same time, she felt greatly wronged. After all, think about it. Another repulsive woman used the fact that she was pregnant with her man's child to force her to abdicate. No one would be able to adjust their mood quickly. Given her conservative mindset, how could she have guessed that Song Enya had used her methods to steal the sperm to achieve such a pioneering feat of artificial insemination? Mu Yaja found that something was wrong with her. He suddenly got up and walked in front of her, but he saw that she kept her head down and didn't say a word. She looked very depressed. "What happened?" he asked. Yun Shirshir suddenly pushed him away expressionlessly and walked to the dining table. She poured herself a cup of cold water and gulped it down. It was only after she downed the glass of water that she seemed to have calmed down a little. Once she had calmed down, she raised her head and looked at the man, who had sat down beside her without saying a word, and finally said, "Song Enya asked to meet me today." Mu Yaja was also surprised. She's back in the capital? Looks like you're not well informed enough. She didn't know why, but there was a bit of sarcasm in her words. It was as if she needed him to bear some of her unhappiness so that she could feel better. Chapter 2156. I'm not in the company anymore, so I naturally don't get the latest news. Yun Shirshir used a single word to express her displeasure. Mu Yaja was not annoyed. Instead, as if dealing with a sulking child, he gently rubbed her head with his large palm and asked gently, "What's wrong? You're back and you look so tense." "How can I be in a good mood after meeting AB*? Teach?" She retorted self-righteously, but because of the man's gentle patience, the anger in her heart subsided a lot. "What did she do to you? Tell me about it." Yun Shirshir gripped the glass of water tightly and suddenly exerted force. Perhaps she exerted too much force, so much so that the back of her hand vaguely showed green veins. She blew on her head with a gloomy expression. Her shoulders did not move at all, and there was no undulation as if she was brewing. Suddenly she said, "Song Enya told me that she's pregnant." Song Enya is pregnant. Mu Yaja, on the other hand, was not too surprised by this. He merely raised a brow but did not comment on it as he quietly observed her expression. Yun Shirshir continued, "I thought it was fake, but she took out a paternity test report. It said there is a relationship between father and daughter. Tell me, what's going on?" "A paternity test?" "Yes. This kind of report can't be forged, right?" Yun Shirshir waited for him to give a reasonable explanation. But after waiting for a while, the man rested his chin on his hand and lazily said, "Oh." Yun Shirshir exploded. "What do you mean by, oh? Isn't he surprised? Isn't he going to ask what's going on? Could it be that he knew about Song Enya's pregnancy? But under normal circumstances, other than the person involved, who else would know about this kind of thing?" The anger in Yun Shirshir's heart surged up again, filling her chest. She couldn't calm down, and her eyes became red and swollen. She shouted at him angrily, "Aren't you going to give me an explanation?" Behind the wall, Yu and Xiao Yichen heard the commotion in the living room and quietly hid behind the wall. However, it seemed like something troublesome was going on and it was not convenient for them to show themselves. Hence, they could only hide behind the wall and eavesdrop. Mu Yaja suddenly chuckled. "I found out that you, little guy, can get jealous too." His tone, which was full of indulgence, did not extinguish the knot in her heart. Instead, it fueled her anger. "What are you talking about? Can you explain this matter to me?" She was not annoyed by Song Enya but by this man's cold attitude. Yun Shirshir glared at him. Her eyes were filled with tears, but she held it in because of her stubbornness. This was clearly such a serious matter, yet he was still laughing? He even used such a doting tone. Did he think that he could hypnotize her anger and calm her down? Yun Shirshir suddenly felt quite indignant, but she heard him suddenly ask, "Did she tell you that she's pregnant with my child? Do you believe it, then?" He stared at her seriously, wanting to hear her answer. Chapter 2157. Mu Yaja's heart warmed when he heard that. Then, in a gentle and charming tone, he asked her, "What other explanation do you want from me?" Yun Shirshir continued to pull a long face, stubbornly wanting an explanation. She pouted and said unhappily, "She couldn't have gotten pregnant for no reason, right? Could it be that the child in her stomach is a ghost fetus?" Mu Yaja suddenly reached out and pulled her into his arms. Yun Shirshir struggled at first, pushing him awkwardly and pounding his chest with her little pink fists. However, her weak strength was nothing to him. The man reached out his other hand and stopped her easily. Seeing that she was about to flare up, he suddenly said, "The child in her stomach isn't mine." "What?" Yun Shirshir's eyes widened in shock. Mu Yaja laughed. "You heard it. How is that possible? If it's not your child, whose child could it be?" She had burned the report in a fit of anger. If it hadn't been burned, she would have brought it back and flung it at his face so that he could see it with his own eyes. "In the report she showed you, before the paternity was confirmed, was there such a sentence at the end, excluding the interference of identical twins, close relatives, and external help?" Yun Shirshir racked her brains for a moment and suddenly recalled that there was indeed such a sentence in the report. Seeing her pondering expression, Mu Yaja smiled. Do you remember now? Looks like you're not stupid after all. You know how to read that sentence. He teased her, but Yun Shirshir slapped his hand away. And then? What does this sentence mean? Mu Yaja said casually, in other words, if she's pregnant with someone else's child, a paternity test will also show that we're related. Yun Shirshir was stunned. What do you mean? Mu Yaja flicked her forehead in exasperation and snorted. You little fool. Now you know how to be quiet? You looked like a crazy kitten just now. He coaxed her with just a few words. After she calmed down, Mu Yaja told her everything from the beginning to the end. Ever since Song Enya left the hospital without saying goodbye and went missing for a few days in Sea City, he quickly found out about her whereabouts. Through investigation, he found out that this crazy woman wanted to secretly use artificial insemination to get pregnant with his child so that she could threaten him into marrying her. The Mews were in charge of a private sperm bank, where most of the Mews' resources were kept. Song Enya had bribed the higher-ups in charge of the sperm bank. After getting her hands on the stuff, she settled down in an American hospital. After a short period of recuperation and intense preparation for pregnancy, she finally succeeded. However, he had already found out about this matter and secretly arranged for the sperm she had stolen to be swapped with Mu Yenqing's. Furthermore, he had also destroyed all the sperm he had stored in the sperm bank. This was to prevent something like this from happening again. In fact, preserving genes was a common practice in the Mews. However, he had always scoffed at this kind of cooking. Chapter 2158. The reason why his sperm was kept in the sperm bank was because 7 years ago, Yun Shirshir wanted to be a surrogate for the Mu family. Initially, she had considered using artificial insemination. However, because her physical condition was not suitable for it, they changed the method. Mu Yaja just forgot to destroy it. It was all thanks to Song Enya, who reminded him that there was such a hidden danger. Hence, this time he destroyed it all. However, the funny thing was that the quality of Mu Yenqing's sperm did not seem to be too good. Song Enya was completely in the dark and even suffered a lot in order to get pregnant. Test tube babies were very painful and costly. As the one who got pregnant, she had to suffer a lot. However, Song Enya did not hesitate and swore not to give up until she got pregnant. After a lot of torment, she finally succeeded. However, the funny thing was that the child she had tried so hard to conceive was going to disappoint her in the end. Although the paternity test report proved that they were related by blood, it was still because the child in Song Enya's stomach was his nephew. Oh! Yun Shirshir furrowed her brows thoughtfully. So that's how it is. Oh! Mu Yaja imitated her tone and suddenly pulled her into his arms and ravaged her. Little fool, I wonder who was the one who was angry at me earlier. Now that you know the truth, your anger has subsided? His large palm could not stop ravaging and rubbing her face. Yun Shirshir knew that she was in the wrong, so she let him rub her face. It hurt a little, so she slapped his hand away and said angrily, I didn't know. How would I know that she would use such a shocking method to get pregnant with your child? How would I know that you've secretly replaced Mu Yenqing's sperm with yours? You didn't tell me any of this. How would I know? She felt extremely wronged. Yes, she was not calm enough, but any woman would remain calm and rational when faced with such conclusive evidence. She was angry and jealous because she cared too much about him. Her concern made her lose her mind. When the two little lads who were hiding behind the wall saw that the matter had been settled, they looked at each other in relief and returned to their room. Really? How old were they? This pair of clowns was still so worrisome. In the living room, Yun Shirshir was still a little angry. Song Enya had already come knocking on his door. Although he had received a satisfactory and reasonable explanation for the matter, he was still very unhappy about it. Are you jealous? He was half playful and half coaxing. His tone was gentle, but there was a hint of mischief in it. Yun Shirshir snorted and nestled in his arms. Her tone was rather coquettish. How would I dare? She's the little sister that you've always doted on. All these years, the one who's been by your side is her, not me. How would I dare to compare myself with her and covet her position in your heart? Before he could finish his sentence, a strong sour smell assaulted his nostrils, making him choke. Mu Yaja didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It wasn't that he hadn't seen her jealous before, but it was the first time he saw her being so jealous. He rarely mentioned anything about Song Enya to her. However, this woman had heard about it from some unknown channel, so much so that she had a strong hostility toward his and Song Enya's past. Chapter 2159. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows and retorted disapprovingly, "Thoughts? What thoughts can I have?" Yun Shirshir pouted at his nonchalant tone. She punched his chest again and muttered unhappily, "I'm the one asking you. Can't you just answer me properly?" The man asked shamelessly again, "What kind of answer do you want?" "You?" Yun Shirshir was exasperated. She crossed her arms over her chest and turned her face away, ignoring him. Seeing that she was really angry, Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh. He had provoked her on purpose so that he could enjoy watching her get jealous over him. What she didn't know was that in his eyes, she looked so cute when she was so spoiled. This little fool had always been so obedient and sensible in front of him. She was so sensible that she didn't seem like his girlfriend, but more like a virtuous sister. The problem was that he wanted her to be like a beautiful and delicate princess, the moon surrounded by stars, high above the masses, elegant and charming. Women like to be a little willful. In front of the man they loved, they would be a little mischievous and aloof. It was the dream of many women to be able to be doted on and treasured like a luminous pearl in the palm of their hand. But this woman, perhaps because of her circumstances, had an extremely insecure personality. Perhaps it was because she was so afraid of losing him that she rarely showed her most common instinct as a wife, jealousy, on her face. In front of him, there were many times when she was trembling with fear and trepidation. She didn't dare to be willful or unreasonable. Sometimes, she would even show her fear that he would be angry. That kind of cautiousness made his heart ache and gave him a headache. He didn't want her to be so uneasy beside him. Compared to being obedient and sensible, he hoped that she would be more unreasonable, more arrogant, and more dependent on him. Even if she was really like those noble princesses, so what? It wasn't like he couldn't pamper her. The greatest love a man could give to a woman was to pamper her like a princess for the rest of his life. He reached out and pulled her into his arms again. Yun Shirshir snorted, obviously not wanting to bother with him. Even though she was pulled into his arms, she struggled a little. Her face was dark and she seemed to be sulking. Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh. "My little fool, you're so cute even when you're jealous." She retorted in exasperation, "Who said that I'm jealous?" Mu Yaja didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Every expression on your face, every look, tells me that you're jealous. What do you think?" She glanced at him from the corner of her eye, only to see him smiling playfully. Her face burned as if it had been doused with molten iron. She blushed in embarrassment, but she still stubbornly pouted. "When did I? What jealousy? It's so weird. Be good. Don't let your imagination run wild between me and Enya." Mu Yaja had only said one sentence when Yun Shirshir glared at him with extreme sensitivity and gnashed her teeth. "Enya? You call her so intimately. Cough. That woman." Mu Yaja hurriedly corrected himself. Yun Shirshir's expression then eased a little. She suddenly muttered with lingering fear, "Actually, I've been thinking, what if your plan failed this time?" Chapter 2160. Mu Yaja furrowed his brows. He did not understand what she meant when she said that the plan had failed. If you didn't replace your thing in time, and Song Enya got pregnant with your child, what would you do? Yun Shirshir looked up and stared at him seriously. She was eager to get the answer from him. Her question was because of her sense of security. Mu Yaja curled his lips, but his expression was full of arrogance. "There are no ifs. If a man can't even control his own child, wouldn't he be a failure? What if you failed? It's better to be safe than sorry, isn't it? What if?" She stubbornly wanted to know what he would do if he were in such a situation. Would he still be as carefree as he was now when Song Enya got pregnant with his child? Mu Yaja pondered for a moment and then said without hesitation, I'll probably force her to abort the child. Abort? She stared at him with widened eyes and breathless eyes, feeling incomparably shocked. Abort? So cruel? Although she hated Song Enya and even loathed her, the child in her stomach was innocent. However, no one was surprised by his answer. This man had always been ruthless and cold. He would not leave any leeway for others. Such an answer gave her a great sense of security. To her, this was the best way to protect her. In this matter, Mu Yaja's choice was probably to minimize the harm to her. Even so, this man could be so decisive and cold at times that it made one's heart palpitate. Yun Shirshir suddenly asked, "That's your flesh and blood. Can you bear to abort it?" Mu Yaja lowered his head and pulled her into his embrace. He playfully caressed her red lips with his slender fingers, pressing them a few inches before gently caressing them. When he was done, he gently lowered his gaze to look into her eyes. Suddenly, he lowered his head and gently sucked on the corner of her lips. Yun Shirshir's red lips parted slightly. With a howl, she bit his fingertip. Her pearly white teeth rubbed against his fingertip and nibbled gently. However, she did not use much force, just like a kitten's bite. From his point of view, the woman sucking on his fingertip was a little too seductive, so much so that he immediately thought of another kind of extreme pleasure. Under such a visual impact, a certain part of him suddenly heated up. Even his body gradually became boiling hot. Yun Shirshir coquettishly said, "In the future, mind your own business. Don't create such trouble again." Just as her voice fell, Yun Shirshir suddenly realized that her words seemed to have implied another embarrassing meaning. Her face instantly heated up. What do you mean by an acre of land? How could she not control herself and say such a dirty joke? He must have been a bad influence on her. When Mu Yaja heard this, he found it interesting and nodded. "Okay, I'll mind my own business. Such a thing will never happen again." With that said, the man bent down and kissed her lips. After a charming and inseparable kiss, he hugged the back of her neck and pressed his lips against hers. He said seductively, "My child can only have one mother." Chapter 2161. The man pecked her lightly before continuing. "My child can only have one mother. It can only be you." Yun Shirshir was extremely moved when she heard that. She smiled warmly and hugged Mu Yaja back. Her heart was warm, and under her emotions she let out a heartfelt chagrin. "Do you know? I'm indeed jealous of Song Enya. I'm jealous of her for being able to accompany you in your best years. I've been thinking that fate is really unfair. Why didn't I meet you earlier? How great would it have been if we had met earlier?" Mu Yaja was stunned for a moment when he heard that. Then, he laughed helplessly and looked at her dotingly. Gently tucking her hair behind her ear, he chided, "Silly girl." Yun Shirshir remained silent as she snuggled into her husband's embrace, feeling extremely sentimental. The man's gentle voice suddenly sounded above her head. "We didn't meet too late." "Huh? I'd rather meet you later and be with you for the rest of my life." Yun Shirshir's eyes flickered. She had not expected Mu Yaja to say such touching words. This was probably the warmest thing he had ever said to her, wasn't it? She could not help hugging him tightly. Her hands clutched at his collar as tears welled up in her eyes. "Shirshir, what you have is the best version of me." With that, he carried her in his arms and slowly walked into the bedroom. 11 o'clock at night. The night was getting darker. When Mu Yaja walked out of the shower and sat on the bed, he saw that the screen of his phone was lit up. Just as he picked it up, his ringtone suddenly rang. It was a call from a number. He glanced at it. It was an unknown number, but it was not difficult to guess who it was. He immediately guessed who it was. Mu Yaja sat at the head of the bed and casually lit a cigarette. Then, he calmly answered the call. Song Enya's helpless and choked voice could be heard from the other end. He was never one to drag his feet. Now that his niece was back, he naturally had to make things clear. Firstly, he didn't want to be the scapegoat. Secondly, he was actually looking forward to the show that was about to unfold. Rumor had it that Mu Linfeng intended to arrange a marriage for Mu Yanqing and had set his sights on the Lin family's third daughter. He was quite well informed in this regard. Although he was not in Mu Group now, the people in Mu Group were all his spies. It was easy for him to know every move of Mu Group. Now that Song Enya was pregnant, if the Muse were to find out that she was carrying Mu Yenqing's child, things would definitely develop in an interesting manner. As soon as he answered the call, he heard Song Enya's hoarse and choked voice. "Brother Mu, what should I do?" As she wept bitterly, she sought his pity. A certain part of a woman's nature was stimulated to the extreme at this moment. Women had always been more fragile and pretentious than men. At this moment, Song Enya tried her best to put herself in the most inferior position, only hoping that Mu Yaja would take pity on her. Even if it was just pity, she hoped that he would reach out and hug her. She really missed him. Chapter 2162. Mu Yaja took a deep puff of his cigarette but did not say anything. He just held the phone silently and listened to the sobbing sound from the other end. However, at this moment, her helplessness, confusion, and despair could not move him at all. He was already so disappointed with this woman that no matter how pitiful she looked, it would not make him feel any pity for her. She cried, "Brother Mu, can you come and accompany me? I have something to tell you." Mu Yaja pondered for a moment before agreeing. "Okay, where are you?" "A cafe in the city center. I'll wait for you in the private room of the restaurant where I treated you to drinks in the past." She desperately hoped that he would appear in front of her in the next second. Mu Yaja responded. Just as he hung up and put down his phone, he saw Yun Shirshir push open the door and walk into the bedroom. She saw him putting down his phone. Earlier in the bathroom, she heard him talking. He seemed to be on the phone with someone. She suspected that it was Song Enya who had called. In her vigilance, she rushed out without drying her hair. Mu Yaja could not help but laugh when he saw that she was full of vigilance. "This little idiot is quite vigilant." Yun Shirshir cleared her throat and pretended to be calm as she asked, "It's so late. Who called?" Mu Yaja glanced at her and said calmly, "Song Enya." "I know it's her without guessing." "Then why are you asking when you already know the answer?" Yun Shirshir pouted and glanced at him. Actually, she just wanted to see if he would tell her the truth. After all, in the past, he would never tell her anything no matter what. However, ever since she complained to him about this problem that day, this man paid special attention to this aspect and improved a lot. At least, no matter what she asked, even if it was about company matters and she did not understand, he would tell her seriously. Seeing that he did not deliberately hide it from her, she pursed her lips and said, "I guess that she would call you. She must be looking for you because of the child in her stomach, right? Poor thing. She probably naively thinks that she's pregnant with your child and wants you to take responsibility for it." Thinking about it this way, it was extremely scary. This man was really super scheming. When he knew that Song Enya was pregnant with his child, he was not angry about it. In a situation where he did not say a word, even someone as vigilant as Song Enya did not notice his trick. He actually carried out his plan without anyone knowing. Furthermore, he was at ease watching Song Enya, like a clown, go through all the trouble and suffering, and finally get pregnant with his child. Fortunately, he was able to maintain his composure. Under such circumstances, he was still able to calmly come up with such a meticulous plan. If he did not have some tricks up his sleeve and shrewdness, he would not be able to achieve such a position. Still, after witnessing his style of doing things, she could not help but be surprised. For such a man, one would either be on the same side as him. If one were to become his enemy, one would definitely be played in the palm of his hand and die without knowing how. Thinking of this, Yun Shirshir felt better and silently sympathized with Song Enya. She would not die if she did not seek death. The sins of heaven could be forgiven, but the sins of one's own doing were the hardest to bear. She had to bear the consequences of her own actions. Chapter 2163. Mu Yaja nodded. Yun Shirshir said, "Go ahead then, since she wants to see you." Mu Yaja was a little surprised. "You're so assured that I'll go? What else can I do?" Yun Shirshir suddenly fiddled with her hair, which was still a little wet, and smiled coquettishly. "It's already so late. I don't believe that you'll abandon your beautiful wife for another woman." "He wouldn't dare?" Mu Yaja chuckled and suddenly said, "I'll give you 10 minutes to blow-dry your hair." His domineering tone was just like his style. Yun Shirshir widened her eyes. Mu Yaja stubbed out his cigarette and took a deep breath. Then he slowly got up and walked to her side. He grabbed her hand and kissed her fingertips. "You'll go with me?" Yun Shirshir was stunned for a moment before a smile appeared on her lips. Half an hour later, Mu Yaja drove over. After parking the car, Yun Shirshir got out and looked up. She broke out in a cold sweat. "Isn't this the place where Song Enya asked me to meet? Could it be that she hasn't left after so long? It's already 11 at night. The cafe should be closed by now, right?" Mu Yaja locked the car and walked forward to hug her. Seeing her dazed expression, he looked down and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Let's go in." Yun Shirshir smiled at him, only to see the man reach out and interlock his fingers with hers tightly as they walked into the cafe together. As soon as the two of them entered, the waiter hurried over and said with a trembling smile, "Hello, both of you. I'm sorry, we're already closed. I have an appointment with someone to meet me here." As soon as he said that, the waiter came to a realization and shook his head helplessly. "It's that lady, right? Actually, our cafe is already closed, but she seems to be in a bad mood. She's sitting alone in the private room, looking very down. We're too embarrassed to say anything. If it's convenient for you, please talk to her. We're in a hurry to get off work." The cafe was supposed to close at 10, but it was already 11 now. Naturally, they could not get off work if the customer did not leave. Yun Shirshir nodded. The waiter led them to the door of the private room and said with a smile, "This is the place." With that, he pushed the door open. Inside the private room, Song Enya stood up agitatedly when she heard footsteps coming from outside. "Brother Mu is here." So fast. She had originally despaired and thought that he probably wouldn't show up tonight. She did not expect him to still show up. It must be because he still can't forget her? He must still have some feelings for her. As long as that was the case, everything would be much easier. Song Enya knew Mu Yaja best. He had always been a sentimental person. Although she had done a lot of things to anger him in the past, they were still very close to each other. Moreover, she was pregnant with his child now. He would definitely take responsibility for her. With such hope in her heart, Song Enya quickly walked to the door. When she saw Mu Yaja halfway through the door, a bright and beautiful smile appeared on her face as she called out gently, "Brother Mu." Thus, she was touched and rushed over, wanting to throw herself into his arms. Chapter 2164. When Yun Shirshir walked in behind him, Song Enya froze on the spot as if she had been struck by lightning. Her body stiffened as if ice water had poured over her head, and she could not move an inch. "Yun Shirshir. Why is she here?" How could she forget? Now that Brother Mu was with her, the two of them were already married and had a grand engagement ceremony. She should have been beside him when she called him. How could I not think of that? Still, why did Brother Mu bring me here? Was he worried that I would be worried? But in the past, he was not such a man who cared about others. He had always been swift and decisive in doing things. He was rarely so meticulous, and it was all because of a woman. At the thought of this, Song Enya's face fell. Mu Yaja and Yun Shirshir walked into the private room and saw her standing there alone. Although the room was brightly lit, she seemed to be surrounded by darkness and was lifeless. "Didn't you ask me to talk to you about something important?" Mu Yaja hugged Yun Shirshir and sat down calmly. "Have a seat." Song Enya stood rooted to the spot for a long time before she reluctantly turned around and sat down opposite them. She kept struggling in her heart. If Yun Shirshir were to follow them, then she would be in a very passive situation. Some things were not easy to say in front of her. Song Enya held the glass in her hand. The milk in it had already turned cold. Ever since her pregnancy was confirmed, she had been very careful about the child in her womb, afraid that she would not be able to protect this precious bone. This was her last bargaining chip. It was considered a desperate throw. If she could not protect it, then all her efforts would be in vain. Therefore, she was very careful in everything. The waiter walked in and asked politely, "Would you like to order anything?" Mu Yaja took the menu gracefully and turned his head gently to ask, "Wifey, what would you like to drink?" Wifey, she had already changed her way of addressing him so intimately. Song Enya lowered her head and sat where she was, clutching the corner of her dress. Just these two words were enough to stab her to the bone. The two people opposite him were constantly discussing what to drink and dessert to eat. Sometimes they would bicker, and sometimes they would look at each other and smile. They were so intimate and tacit that they didn't look like a newlywed couple at all. Instead, they looked like a couple who had been married for several years and still had a stable relationship, loving and warm. What was this? Was he putting on an act for her? This must be Yun Shirshir's plan. She wanted to use the opportunity to show off her affection with Brother Mu in front of her to deal a blow to her. Since when had Brother Mu been so gentle to a woman? Song Enya was jealous and sad at the same time. It was as if a healed wound had opened up again, only to discover that it had festered and turned into pus. No coffee. I want to drink coffee. Mu Yaja didn't care about her argument. He turned his head and instructed the waiter, warm up a glass of warm milk and half a bath. Another espresso, no drinks. The waiter smiled as he placed the order. Madam, your boyfriend dotes on you very much. He's so considerate. You two look so loving. Chapter 2165. We're already married. As he spoke, he held Yun Shirshir's hand and interlocked their fingers. The diamond rings on their ring fingers were undoubtedly a declaration that they were officially husband and wife. The waiter was caught off guard and stuffed with a mouthful of dog food. He apologized. Oh, sorry, I didn't notice. But seeing how young you are, I thought you were a young couple. I hope you'll be happy for a long time. The envy in his words made Song Enya feel like she was sitting on pins and needles. Watching the person she loved embrace another woman and receive the envious blessings of others was like sharp thorns stabbing into her heart. The pain was unbearable. Song Enya picked up the glass with trembling hands. Just as she was about to take a sip of milk, she accidentally knocked the glass of milk over on the table, perhaps due to her absent-mindedness. Ah! She screamed uncontrollably, interrupting the harmonious atmosphere in the private room. The waiter glanced at her and saw that the glass of milk had been knocked over on the table. The milky white liquid dripped all the way down the table and wet the hem of her dress. Be careful! The waiter kindly walked forward, picked up a clean cloth in his hand, and wiped her clean. Seeing the other's hand reaching for her dress, Song Enya reflexively protected her lower abdomen and swatted the other's hand away. Don't touch me! The waiter waved his hand and retreated to the side, feeling extremely uneasy. Song Enya came back to her senses and realized that she had unconsciously lost her composure. She immediately blushed and said, I'll wipe it myself. Oh, the waiter politely handed her a white cloth. Song Enya took it with trembling hands and began to wipe it carefully. Perhaps it was because she had experienced too much pain during the pregnancy process that her personality had become especially sensitive and neurotic after this period. Her desire to protect the fetus in her womb had exceeded the scope of a normal mother. Her level of caution was so high that others would think that she was neurotic. After wiping it clean, Song Enya handed the white cloth back to the waiter. The waiter asked, Do you need another cup of warm milk? Still no sugar? After placing the order, the waiter respectfully retreated. Song Enya lowered her head and leaned weakly against the sofa. Her face was pale as if she had collapsed. Yun Shirshir glanced at her and then lowered her head to play games on her phone. Since Song Enya had made an appointment with Mu Yaja, she naturally would not say anything. She was just here to accompany him. In other words, the man probably wanted to use this method to completely destroy the last bit of obsession she had for him. Mu Yaja had made up his mind to use such a cruel method to draw a clear line between him and his niece. Most likely, no woman would continue to pester her beloved man after seeing such a loving scene with his beloved wife. Unless the person was extremely thick-skinned. Still, Song Enya should belong to the latter. Otherwise, she would not have been so crazy as to use test tube babies and try to conceive his child at all costs. Mu Yaja turned his face to Song Enya, but compared to the gentleness he showed to Yun Shirshir, his expression was cold and indifferent. He asked, Why did you ask me to come here? Chapter 2166. He had already found out about Song Enya's pregnancy from Yun Shirshir, but he wanted her to say it herself. Since she was so shameless, he might as well completely crush her last bit of dignity. He was heartless and cruel to a person who no longer had any feelings for. Song Enya remained silent. Her face was red, and she did not know how to open her mouth in front of Yun Shirshir. Previously, she had announced to Yun Shirshir that she had a one-night stand with Brother Mu, which resulted in this child. This was just her way of sowing discord. But in reality, such a thing did not exist. She originally wanted to ask Brother Mu out alone and use both hard and soft tactics, hoping that he would take responsibility for his child and give her an explanation. She also wanted to sow discord between him and Yun Shirshir. However, in front of Yun Shirshir, she really did not know how to smooth things over. If he were to ask where the child came from, how should she answer? If Yun Shirshir was not around, she could tell him the truth. After all, she was already pregnant, and Brother Mu would not do anything to her. However, Yun Shirshir was around. Did she have to expose the lies she had told before? That would undoubtedly be slapping her own face. Seeing her conflicted look, Mu Yaja lost his patience and took a cigarette in his mouth. He did not know if he did it on purpose or not, but he lit it. As soon as he lit it, the air in the room became stuffy. After 2 puffs, the room was already filled with smoke. Song Enya's nerves flared up all of a sudden. She lifted her head only to see the man sitting opposite her puffing away. Her heart was filled with grievances, and tears gushed out of her eyes at once. "Brother Mu, can you put out the cigarette? I am pregnant." Pregnant? Mu Yaja was not in a hurry to put out the cigarette. He watched expressionlessly as she covered her mouth and nose with a wary and disgusted expression. Instead, he found it funny. "How did you get pregnant?" Song Enya was at a loss for words, not knowing how to answer this question. Poor Song Enya, however, had no idea that the 2 men sitting in front of her had already figured her out. She was still trying hard to cover up the ugly things she had done, but in reality, Mu Yaja had already seen through her tricks. At this moment, they were treating her like a joke. Song Enya dared not take a deep breath. She covered her mouth and nose as tears streamed down her face. Choking on her tears, she confessed, "I'm pregnant with your child." "My child?" Mu Yaja laughed coldly and questioned her, "How did you get pregnant? I don't remember anything happening between us." His words were undoubtedly meant to embarrass her. However, since she had already said so, she couldn't care less about her dignity and face. Since she had already lost all face, she might as well tell him everything. She might as well be hysterical. She was barefooted, so why would she be afraid of Yun Shirshir, who was wearing shoes? Chapter 2167. I'm pregnant. No matter what method I used, I'm indeed pregnant with your child. Now, the child is almost 4 weeks old. I hope you'll take responsibility for this child and me. As soon as she finished speaking, Yun Shirshir's face remained calm, but she sneered inwardly. This Song Enya was making herself sound so dignified. She actually wanted him to take responsibility. On what basis? She had a child for no reason and wanted to use it as a bargaining chip. Aren't you being a little too naive? Mu Yaja put out the cigarette in his hand, but he was not in a hurry to expose her. Instead, he remained calm and pretended to listen patiently. Seeing that he did not refute her, Song Enya felt a little more confident. She glanced at Yun Shirshir and then looked at him. I heard from this woman that you gave up the position of the head of the Mu family for her. Is that true? If that's really the case, Brother Mu, are you crazy? Looking at the entire Mu family, which one of them didn't fight to the death for this position? You actually gave up this position for her. Why did you take things so hard? Mu Yaja was very indifferent to her questioning. Took things so hard? You're wrong. I'm sick of it. It has nothing to do with her. Song Enya was stunned. He was defending her. He was still defending her at this time. How much did he value this? At that time, in order to seize the position of the head of the Mu family, he almost went all out and swept away 1,000 soldiers to sit in that position. How could he be so carefree now? This was not like him. In her heart, he had always been an ambitious schemer with extraordinary ability and charisma. Now, he was actually using the words, "I'm sick of it," to excuse himself. If this was not protecting her, what was it? Brother Mu, what do you mean by sick of it? This woman doesn't know, but I've always seen it. How much have you sacrificed for the Mu Group and Dishing Financial Group? How can you be so carefree? It must be the muse who made you choose between being the head of the family and her. Do you know the consequences of your hot-headedness? All your years of hard work have gone down the drain. Are you really willing to accept this? Willing? How could he be willing to accept this? However, he could only give up everything that belonged to Mu Group for a short period of time. Sooner or later he would take it back with interest. At this moment, the waiter pushed the door open and walked in. He placed the milk and coffee in front of the door and left. Song Enya calmed herself down for a moment before forcing a smile on her face. As if to encourage him, she told him smilingly, "The reason why the muse don't acknowledge her is that she's not worthy of you. But I'm different. My father is the mayor. You should know the status of the Song family in Beijing and the background behind them. If I'm with you, relying on my mother's influence, your future will only be brighter. Perhaps the elders of the Mu family would have some misgivings about me before this. But things were different now. I'm pregnant with your child. The child in my belly is a boy. As long as I give birth to a son for you, your position will only be more stable." Mu Chichi thought to herself. At that time, who would be able to shake your position? But if you're with this woman, she'll only drag you down. Chapter 2168. When Yun Shirsher heard this, she could not hold it in any longer and retorted sarcastically, "I don't think that a woman who would use unscrupulous means to blackmail someone with a child can say such words. Song Enya, don't be too self-righteous. I won't be a burden to him. You have no right to criticize me on this." Song Enya pointed at her hysterically and said angrily, "He, it's not your place to lecture me." Instead of getting angry, Yun Shirsher laughed and said mockingly, "It's not your place to lecture me either, is it? I'm warning you. If you have something to say, say it. Don't make me unhappy when the time comes and kick you into miscarriage." Her domineering and ruthless words made Song Enya shudder in fear. She subconsciously covered her lower abdomen and complained tearfully, "How dare you? Do you think I wouldn't dare? Do you want me to kick you for you to see?" As Yun Shirsher said this, she clenched her fists tightly. She had wanted to do this for a long time. If it were not for the fact that the child was innocent, she would have kicked the missy when she was pestering her earlier. Song Enya narrowed her eyes and sneered. "A woman's heart is the most vicious. Let Brother Mu see your true colors." With that, she looked at Mu Yaja and complained, "Brother Mu, listen to this. These are the words of the woman you've been protecting all this time. You actually want to harm me and your biological child. Who said that the child in your stomach is my flesh and blood?" Mu Yaja suddenly said this lazily. He stretched out his arm lazily and hugged Yun Shirsher's shoulder. It was a casual gesture, but it showed that he was protecting her. Song Enya's heart sank when she saw this. However, she soon realized what Mu Yaja had said earlier and shuddered. She immediately retorted righteously, "Brother Mu, don't you believe what I said? If you don't believe me, we can do a paternity test." "Song Enya, do you really think that you can get pregnant with my child without my knowledge through artificial insemination?" Mu Yaja interrupted her coldly. His words were filled with mockery and contempt. Song Enya was stunned. "Brother Mu, what do you mean by that?" Mu Yaja took a sip of coffee and smiled, but his tone was so cold that it was almost cruel. "I think you probably bribed the higher-ups in charge of the sperm bank, so that you could get what you wanted. In order to achieve his goal, he was willing to do whatever it took. However, I'm sorry to inform you that while you were preparing for pregnancy, I've already sent someone to make a swap. Hence, you're carrying Mu Yenqing's child now." Her words had, without a doubt, mercilessly nailed the missy to a bloody cross. She widened her eyes in disbelief as she stared at his handsome face with a ferocious and unfocused gaze. Her mouth was wide open, but she could not utter a word for a long time. After a long futile effort, she finally squeezed out 3 words. Impossible. Impossible. Impossible." She had meticulously planned this plan. To ensure that nothing would go wrong, she went through with the IVF surgery. Now, He was telling her that the sperm had been swapped and that the child in her stomach was actually Mu Yanqing's. How could this be? Chapter 2169. Song Enya's body swayed. She felt as if the world had turned dark, as if doomsday had arrived. She wanted to cry, but she could not. Her mouth was wide open. Her shocked and dazed expression made her look as comical as a clown's, yet it was also filled with destructive despair. She clenched her fists, trembling. Almost hysterically, she cried out, "Impossible! It's impossible! I made sure that it was yours. That's why I went through with the operation. How could you have the chance to swap it? How could he have detected her actions?" She had clearly done a very thorough job of keeping it a secret. How did he find out? Impossible? Mu Yaja's lips curled into a nonchalant smile as he lazily leaned back on the sofa, enjoying her despairing look. There was no sign of love on his face. Instead, it was a bone-deep disgust. What kind of confidence do you have to think that you can hide from me and do such a despicable thing behind my back? Song Enya, it's time for you to wake up. If you continue to be so stubborn, you'll only make me hate you. The loathing in his eyes stung her in an instant. Song Enya stared at his piercing gaze. She felt as if all her bones had been smashed into smithereens. As if she had lost her mind, she kept muttering, "Impossible! Impossible!" This man always had this kind of ability. With just a few words, he could beat her until she was riddled with scars and dripping with blood. But, thank you for reminding me that there was still a hidden danger. So, while you were undergoing the artificial insemination, I sent Minyu to personally supervise you and order someone to destroy the evidence. With that, he coldly curled his lips into a nonchalant and elegant smile. Isn't it time for you to wake up from your dream? Song Enya bit her lower lip hard as she broke down and cried out loud. She was not just awake, she was already in pieces. How could this be? How could this be? The plan she had planned for so long was actually shattered by him so easily. In an instant, she fell from a high place to the bottom of the valley and was smashed to pieces. In a daze, she raised her head and saw Yun Shirshir's calm face. From the beginning to the end, she was so elegant and calm, as if she did not care about such a conversation. That's right. Right now, she was like a high and mighty princess who was doted on by Brother Mu. Brother Mu gave his all to build a tall castle for her to protect her in. No matter what she did, she would not be able to hurt her in the slightest. How much did she yearn for such doting? She also wanted to be a carefree princess and enjoy the love of her beloved man, but, isn't it time for you to wake up from your dream? Mu Yaja's cold words were still ringing in his ears. Song Enya seemed to have gone mad all of a sudden as she stared fixedly into his eyes. Holding on to her last shred of hope, she demanded aggressively, "Brother Mu, I don't want you to take responsibility anymore. I really don't want you to take responsibility anymore. So, please tell me. Don't be so cruel. Tell me that the child in my stomach is yours, right? Is it because you hate him and want me to get rid of him that you said those words?" What he said just now was just to provoke her so that she would abort the child on her own accord. Is that so? Mu Yaja said coldly, "Stop joking." Chapter 2170. Stop joking. These 5 simple words once again plunged her into a state of despair. Song Enya slumped into the chair, her body on the verge of collapsing. She no longer had the strength to speak. Tears streamed down her face as she cried helplessly. "Boo! Why are you treating me so cruelly? I just want to be with you, even if it's in a lowly way. What did I do wrong?" Mu Yaja lit another cigarette and casually picked up the phone. Yun Shirshir glanced at him and suddenly felt that this man was really two-faced. There was a pregnant woman sitting in front of him, but he casually picked up a cigarette, lit it, and started smoking again. Actually, she had never seen him smoke so much. Was he doing it on purpose? He always had this kind of ability to disgust the people he hated a little. After all, she was not his woman, and the child in Song Enya's stomach was not his child. Naturally, there was no need for him to have any scruples. If it were Yun Shirshir who was pregnant at this moment, not to mention him smoking, even if a stranger were to smoke next to him, Given this domineering man's usual style, he would definitely kick the stranger away and ask him to scram. At this thought, Yun Shirshir was amused by her own imagination. What was this called? Protecting his calf. On second thought, what was this about protecting his calf? She wasn't his little calf. At most, this was called protecting his wife. What nonsense was this about protecting his calf? Just as Yun Shirshir was letting her imagination run wild, Mu Yaja had already dialed Jiang Qimeng's number. He had long expected that Song Enya would look for him as soon as she returned to the country. At this moment, the Song family probably did not know that she had returned to the capital. He was looking forward to seeing how angry Song Jinggua's stern face would be if the Song family found out that such a reckless daughter had appeared in the family. It would most likely be bruised for a few days. At this time, it was already very late. Jiang Qimeng had gone to bed early, but there was no news of Song Enya. She did not sleep well, and in just over a month, she looked much more haggard. Song Yunshi comforted her and told her to rest early and recuperate, but she couldn't sleep well. Half asleep, she was jolted awake by her ringtone. Thinking that it was a call from her niece, she quickly picked up the call, but the moment the call connected, she heard Mu Yaja's voice on the other end. "Sis, Enya is back." He had always been concise and to the point. There was almost no small talk and he went straight to the point. Jiang Qimeng snapped out of her daze at once. The moment she heard that her niece had returned to the capital, she was overwhelmed with excitement and immediately asked, "Where's Enya? Can you put her on the phone?" "I'm afraid not now." "Why?" Mu Yaja glanced at Song Enya, who was sitting opposite him in a daze and crying. She was not in the mood to answer the call, so he said, "Something happened to her. You'd better bring your family over to deal with it." "What?" "Your good daughter has created a mess for you. Without your husband's help, I'm afraid this matter can't be resolved, right?" "Your husband?" This distant form of address left Jiang Qimeng dumbfounded, and she was immediately confused. "What's going on?" "Your daughter is pregnant." Chapter 2171. Mu Yaja hung up the call expressionlessly after a burst of ear-piercing noise and sent the address over. More than half an hour later, the Song family arrived in 3 cars. It was so grand and mighty that even official vehicles were used. Seeing that more people had arrived, the waitress opened the door with a bitter look. Just as she was about to politely say that she would not be serving them anymore, she saw a familiar middle-aged man walking in. She did not recognize him at first glance. After being stunned for a few seconds, she politely said, "Sir, our shop is closed." Halfway through her words, she was immediately pulled away by the store manager. She did not recognize him, but the store manager did. "Isn't this man the capital's mayor? What kind of wind blew such a big shot here?" As soon as Song Jinghua stepped into the store, he waved his hand, and the bodyguards behind him walked into the store in an orderly manner. Then, as if they were chasing away flies, all the employees, including the store manager, were chased out of the store. Everyone complained incessantly. They were wearing flimsy uniforms. The weather outside was a few degrees below zero. The few of them hugged their bodies and shivered. However, when they glanced at the car used by the Zheng residents parked at the side, they immediately swallowed their anger and did not dare to say anything. D***. Today was the worst day of their lives. They had offended someone they should not have offended. They had worked so hard to run a business, yet they still had to worry about offending someone. After clearing the place, Song Jinghua and Song Yunshi led Jiang Qimeng to the private room. As soon as they opened the door, they saw Song Enya sitting at the table in a daze. It was as if she had suffered a huge blow and her soul had left her body. Jiang Qimeng was about to go up to her when she was stopped by her father. "Stand aside." He was already a little grumpy after being disturbed in the middle of the night. When he saw that this woman still wanted to protect his daughter at this time, his tone naturally turned bad. The man walked straight toward the missy and stopped in his tracks. Without calling out her name, he grabbed her by the collar and gave her a tight slap across her face. Smack! A thunderous sound was heard, so much so that the small box was filled with the resounding echo of the slap. Song Enya, who had been slapped to the sofa, sat up with a numb look on her face and raised her head. When Jiang Qimeng saw this, her heart was broken, but she didn't dare to say anything. She just stood to the side worried. Song Enya, who had been crying so hard for a long time that her throat was hoarse, finally knew to stop. However, even though she had stopped crying, she was still in a daze. Even when Song Jinghua walked in with his men, she did not notice. She still sat there in a daze without any reaction. However, after being slapped by Song Jinghua, her eyes were slightly dazed and she couldn't react for a moment. She got up from the sofa and felt a burning pain on her face. Her entire head was shaking. It wasn't until her line of sight regained its focus that she realized that Song Jinghua had come. She then realized who had slapped Rayleigh just now. Chapter 2172. You're such a disgrace. What's going on? Song Jinghua was exasperated and wanted to slap her a few more times. One slap was not enough to appease his anger, but looking at her, he pitied her. However, on second thought, Jiang Qimeng said that she had returned to the capital, but she was carrying a child in her stomach. How could an unmarried girl from a prestigious family get pregnant before marriage? Most importantly, they still didn't know whose child this child belonged to. He did not know what this bastard daughter was thinking. She went missing for no reason and came back pregnant. Did she think that his life was not short enough and wanted to anger him to death? He was the mayor. Although he doted on his children, he had always been strict in educating them. If such a thing were to spread, not only would it be offensive to public morals, but it would also affect his status. He was going to run for re-election next year, and he was aiming for a high position. Now, she had inexplicably caused him to lose his life. How could he smooth things over? Song Yunshi did not dare to interrupt, but Jiang Qimeng could not help but feel sorry for her daughter when she saw that the situation was getting out of hand. Jinghua, let's talk this out, she said in an exasperated tone. Shut up. Song Jinghua was already filled with anger, and Jiang Qimeng's recklessness was undoubtedly an act of ignorance. He turned around and did not care that there were outsiders present. He reprimanded her fiercely, if you keep talking, I'll teach you a lesson too. You even said, let's talk things over. If you hadn't spoiled her and let her do whatever she wanted, would she have done such a ridiculous thing? Jiang Qimeng's eyes reddened at his words. She was already worried to begin with, and now that she was reprimanded in front of outsiders, she felt that she had lost all face. She covered her face sadly and turned to the side. When Song Yunshi saw this, she also blamed Jiang Qimeng for being nosy. Seeing that her daughter was being reprimanded by Song Jinghua, she felt sorry for her and immediately comforted her in a low voice. We're outside. You're a woman, so don't interrupt. You have to give Dad face. Don't interrupt what your father is saying. What's the matter? Can't we talk at home? Aren't you making things difficult for Dad? When Jiang Qimeng heard this, she could only suppress the grievance and sadness in her heart. She nodded helplessly, but her eyes were wet. When Song Enya saw how angry her father was, she cried even louder in fear and trepidation. She had always been in awe of Song Jinghua. This father of hers was usually gentle, but once he got angry, he was extremely terrifying. What right do you have to cry here? Tell me, how did the child in your stomach come to be? At such a young age, she didn't have any self-respect at all. She was pregnant, and all she knew was to cry when she came back? Now you look so pitiful. What were you doing before? Song Enya's eyes became even more swollen after the stern reprimand. From the beginning to the end, Song Jinghua did not even look Mu Yaja in the eye. Mu Yaja sneered inwardly. Was this Song Jinghua very powerful? When he was still the heir of the Mu family, whenever he saw him, no matter how big the matter was, he would always greet him warmly. Chapter 2173. Mu Yaja was not a pushover. Since Song Jinghua was so harsh, he could not be bothered to smooth things over for him. In front of everyone, he said in an extremely humiliating tone, I don't know what's wrong with your daughter. She stole my sperm from a sperm bank and secretly ran overseas to undergo IVF. She got pregnant with a child. Song Jinghua's eyes widened when he heard this. What? Jiang Qimeng, who was standing at the side, also widened her eyes in disbelief. Song Yunshi, on the other hand, glared at his niece in surprise. This girl actually did such a thing? She stole someone else's sperm and ran overseas to undergo IVF. Is she crazy? Belatedly, Song Yunshi suddenly realized that when Song Enya went missing earlier, a sum of money had disappeared from his account. The 8-figure sum of money was not allowed to be used. It was left in his hands by his father to manage. Could she have taken this sum of money and used it to do such a ridiculous thing? Bribing a sperm bank and a prostitute, then running overseas to undergo IVF. She must have been possessed by a demon? Song Yunshi bit her lip. At this point, his father had not noticed this matter, so he did not mention it. His father had never asked about this sum of money, but now, he did not dare to say it. If he said that this sum of money had been used by Song Enya, his father would be so angry that he would cripple her. If that happened, Song Enya and the child in her stomach would not be able to keep their lives. At this thought, Song Yunshi broke out in a cold sweat. She could not help but feel worried for Song Enya. Song Enya covered her face in a daze as she sobbed. The side of her ear that had been hit was buzzing, so she could not hear anything at all. She could only vaguely see Song Jinggua's increasingly angry face, which was terrifying to the extreme. IVF. She probably wanted to steal my sperm and get pregnant with my child so that she could blackmail me into marrying her. She stole the wrong sperm, so I didn't manage to conceive a child. Instead, I got pregnant with Mu Yanqing's child. Mu Yaja used the harshest words to humiliate Song Jinghua. Song Jinggua's body swayed, and his face almost fell. His gaze was gloomy and his expression was complicated. Then he clenched his fists. Impossible. To protect his reputation, he denied it and vowed, although my daughter is often muddle-headed, she wouldn't do such a ridiculous thing. Whether he did it or not, won't it be clear when we go home and ask? Mu Yaja sneered again. She knew that I had stepped down as the patriarch, but she still came to me. Not only did she twist words and force logic, but she also confidently asked my wife to abdicate her position. She even asked me to marry her and return to the Mu family to continue to wield the power. She even said that she would use all the power of her mother's family to support me. How ridiculous! Brother Mu! Song Enya could not listen to it anymore. She covered her ears and screamed. It was extremely ear-piercing. With tears in her eyes, she begged pitifully, "Stop talking. Stop talking. Just take it that he took pity on her and did not force her into a corner. Alright, I won't talk about it anymore. However, don't blame me for this. Even if the child in your stomach is mine, I will never acknowledge it. I won't acknowledge my child just because it's someone else's child." These words were undoubtedly the last bit of Song Jinggua's face. Chapter 2174. Song Jinghua sucked in a deep breath of cold air. After contemplating the cold expression on Mu Yaja's face for a long time, he suppressed his indignation and finally spat out a mouthful of turbid air. Hearing Mu Yaja's frosty reply, Song Jinghua had nowhere to vent his anger. This lad can't possibly be lying. No matter what, he found it hard to believe that his precious daughter would actually say such disgraceful words. Using her maternal family's influence? Supporting Mu Yaja in his bid to become the family head again? Using her warm face to stick to his cold butt? As a result, his status as the mayor of the city had been degraded. This woman had been doted on and protected since she was young, but in the end, she was blinded by so-called love when she grew up. Besides, was Mu Yaja someone she should love? She was so blinded by her so-called incestuous love that she sided with an outsider and wanted to use her family's influence at all costs to help Mu Yaja make a comeback. The point was, did he care? He did not even care. It was not as if Song Jinghua had not arranged a marriage for his daughter before. What kind of high official and noble family could not find a match for a madwoman like her? Alas, she did not want any of them and wanted to wholeheartedly revolve around an iceberg. This foolish daughter of his, did she not realize that she was like a moth flying toward a flame? He really wanted to wake her up with a loud scolding and let her see how ruthless the man she loved was to her. In front of so many people, he did not care about her dignity at all and made her lose face as well. The more Song Jinghua thought about it, the more infuriated he felt. He really wanted to slap his niece a few more times, But when he saw her bleak and dejected expression, as well as her eyes staring blankly at her knees, he could not help but feel that she was extremely pitiful. He could not bear to see her like this, so he swallowed the vicious words that were about to come out of his mouth. Forget it. He suppressed his displeasure, but he still had to maintain his poise and bearing. Hence, he waved his hand and ordered, "Let's go home." Song Enya's eyes widened when she heard her father instructing, "Yunshi, help your sister into the car and go home." Upon hearing this, Song Enya burst into tears again. Song Zhenghua immediately scolded, "What are you crying for?" "I'm too ashamed to go back," she shook her head in despair and sorrow. For the sake of this plan, she had put in all her effort and even sacrificed her family's interests, all for a petty and far-fetched reason to stay by his side. It didn't matter if he couldn't see the light, as long as he could stay by her side. But now, she had seen Mu Yaja's attitude towards her with her own eyes. It could be said that she had completely given up. He had completely given up on Chu Yang. Originally, she was unwilling to give up on this man. She had tried her best to get closer to him again and again, but now, she realized that everything she had done was in vain. At this moment, she no longer had any thoughts about him. The moth threw itself into the fire without hesitation and was burned to ashes in the end, dying a tragic death. And now, wasn't she just like that moth, burned and scarred by the raging flames? She no longer had the face to return to that home. I can't go back. Everything can't go back. The past with Brother Mu and everything with the Song family can't go back. Chapter 2175. Song Enya's mental breakdown broke Jiang Qimeng's heart. She walked up to her and hugged her daughter as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Mom doesn't blame you. It's Mom's fault, it's Mom's fault. If I hadn't spoiled you so much, you wouldn't have done such a foolish thing. It's the father's fault for not teaching you well. It's not your fault that I didn't teach you well." Her words were deliberately meant for Song Zhenghua. The reason why she said this was mainly because she did not want him to put all the blame on Song Enya. She was already covered in scars this time. If she were to return home and suffer another blow, she was really afraid that she would lose her daughter forever. As a mother, how could she not see her daughter's current state? She was broken down, hopeless, and wandering on the edge of darkness. If she were to return home, even if Song Zhenghua were to say something harsh, it would be the straw that broke her back. There was another hidden meaning in her words, and it was for Song Zhenghua's benefit. If not for him doting on Song Enya so much when she was young, she wouldn't be so childish and immature. Song Zhenghua's face turned red instantly. He muttered a few words but did not say anything harsh. "What nonsense are you saying? If you don't go home, where else can you go? Go back." Song Zhenghua paused and sighed helplessly. "Dad doesn't blame you anymore." As he said this, he reached out his large palm and gently patted Song Enya's head as a form of consolation. Song Enya started bawling her eyes out like a spoiled child. At the entrance of the cafe, after Song Yunshi and Jiang Qimeng helped Song Enya into the car, Song Zhenghua paid the bill and politely apologized to the waiters and thanked them. Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir were about to leave when Song Zhenghua called out to him. "Yaja!" Mu Yaja turned around and saw Song Zhenghua looking at him with a serious face. He said slowly, "I have something to talk to you about." As he said this, he glanced at Yun Shishir as a form of avoidance. Mu Yaja's lips curled into a smile as he turned to look at Yun Shishir. "Wait for me in the car, okay?" "Good. I will wait for you." Yun Shishir took the car keys and got in the car without consulting anyone. Song Zhenghua got into another car with him. As soon as the door was closed, Mu Yaja's face turned cold. She didn't even need to think about what she wanted to say to him behind closed doors. Dirty linen should not be aired in public. Song Zhenghua, this sanctimonious but cunning old man, must want to discuss some conditions with him. Song Zhenghua sized him up a few times, but he was secretly shocked. As for this kid, he was extremely shocked when he heard the news of his resignation the night before yesterday. This was too sudden. What was even more unexpected was that this kid, who had always been a black-bellied ambitious person, actually took the initiative to give up the position of the Mujia's patriarch. He really could not figure it out. However, at this moment, he looked at the man in front of him, who was leisurely leaning against the window with a cold expression. Even if he was no longer the glorious head of the family, it could not diminish the emperor's aura that he constantly exuded. Song Jinghua said slowly, "I heard that you resigned from the position of the family head." Heard? Chapter 2176. Song Jinghua must have found out that he was no longer the head of the Mu family. However, what he did not find out was, even if he had left the Mu family, it was only temporary. Song Jinghua was stunned. Since Mu Yaja had taken the initiative to shed all pretense of cordiality, he did not bother with pleasantries and went straight to the point. "My daughter's situation this time is all thanks to you. However, I'm a reasonable person. She only has herself to blame for ending up in such a state. On account of your sibling relationship with Jiang Qimeng, I won't pursue this matter with you." In other words, he was implying that he and Song Enya were equally responsible for this matter after leaving the Mu family and falling into dire straits. On account of their relationship, he would not take nothing from him. His words and attitude were all high and mighty. However, Mu Yaja did not fall for it. He sneered and said, "Song Jinghua, don't think that I'm a pitiful worm that can be trampled on by anyone just because I'm no longer the head of the Mu family. The Mu family has been in power for so long, and the power in its hands is definitely not the same as the Mu family's. The fact that I'm able to reach such a stage and now that I'm giving it all up, it can only mean that I don't care about all of this. To put it bluntly, I don't need you to deliberately show mercy and show mercy. Let me give you a piece of advice. Don't put yourself on such a high pedestal. I'm not the one who caused your daughter to end up like this. To put it bluntly, your daughter's current state is troubling me. When Enya was young, I used to think that she was obedient and lovely, but now, she makes me feel disgusted and disgusted." His words gave Song Jinghua a wake-up call. How could that be? Even if Mu Yaja was no longer the head of the Mu family, he was definitely not a pitiful worm that could be trampled on by others. After all, he had offended many enemies when he was still in power. If he did not have absolute confidence, he would not have stepped down from his position and put himself in a passive position. This could only mean that this fellow still had a few trump cards that he had yet to play. At this thought, Song Jinghua's arrogance and haughtiness finally subsided a little. He nodded and smiled. "All right, it's my fault. I was too harsh with my words." Mu Yaja coldly snorted, his expression arrogant. When Song Jinghua saw this, he couldn't help but be glad that he had 2 holes in his nostrils. If he didn't have these 2 holes, he would definitely be angered to the point of hypoxia. He gritted his teeth and suppressed his urge. Suddenly he made a request. "Yaja, there's something you must promise me. No matter what Enya has done to bother you, I will definitely keep an eye on her in the future and never let her do such foolish things again. However, regarding today's matter, as the saying goes, don't wash your dirty linen in public. Enya got pregnant out of wedlock and secretly went abroad for artificial insemination. Keep it a secret for now and don't spread the news. Until I come up with a plan, I hope you will keep your mouth shut." Oh! Mu Yaja had long expected such a request from him. Song Jinghua was a man who cared a lot about his reputation. Given his niece's behavior, it was nothing more than a disgrace to the family's reputation. If she alarmed that powerful old man in the Song family, he would most likely chase her out in a fit of rage. Chapter 2177. Although Song Jinghua scolded Song Enya harshly on the surface, deep down he was still concerned about his daughter's reputation. Perhaps he was more concerned about his own reputation. "You want me to keep your secret?" He nodded guiltily. "Sure, but I have a condition." "A condition?" Song Jinghua's face lit up with joy. It was naturally a good thing that he was willing to raise a condition. He was just afraid that his attitude would be firm and leave no room for negotiation. If he raised a condition, there would naturally be room for negotiation. "But tell me, what is it? If you ask someone to keep a secret, you'll have to pay hush money, right? What do you think of 10 million yuan? Mu Yaja could always think of an extreme way to disgust others. Song Jinghua was so disgusted that his eyeballs almost popped out. 10 million yuan. Where was he going to get such a sum of money? Although he was in a high position and had trusted aides around him in business, He could not have any assets under his name, but there were people in his family who took resources from him to invest. However, he really did not know where he could get 10 million yuan in such a short time. Although he was not as incorruptible as everyone praised him, he was definitely not that corrupt to the point where he could casually take out so much money. So much money? He sighed with a conflicted expression. You can't afford it? Mu Yaja smiled, knowing that he could not afford it. It's fine. If you can't afford 10 million yuan, you can use something else. What do you mean? I heard that the land in Exencheng will be auctioned off by you soon. Song Jinggua's face froze when he heard Mu Yaja's words. Where did he find out about such a confidential matter? While he was still in a daze, Mu Yaja made an exorbitant demand. You should have the right to decide the ownership of that land before the auction. Therefore, I want that piece of land. As soon as he finished speaking, Song Jinghua immediately rejected. Impossible. Once this resort was completed, it would mean that it would be a project with considerable profits. He did indeed have the right to decide the ownership of this piece of land, but at the moment, even though there was no investment, once this piece of land was auctioned, it would be as high as a few hundred million. That would be more than 10 million. Mu Yaja directly asked him for this piece of land. This was undoubtedly cutting off his flesh. Song Jinghua gritted his teeth and looked at him as if he was looking at a devil. He resolutely refused. I can't let you have this land. You want 10 million? Sure. Give me a month and I'll give it to you. 1 month? I can't wait any longer. Either you give me 10 million now, or you give me that piece of land. Otherwise, don't blame me for being merciless. Mu Yaja suddenly smiled deeply. If you don't tell me, how would I not know? I still have some things that you might be interested in. If you are willing to part with it, I will give you face. Something that he was interested in? Song Jinghua stood rooted to the ground. Could it be the evidence of those unspeakable things that he had done? Once he thought of this, he started to feel uneasy. This fellow, how could he be so shrewd? He had actually managed to get his hands on the evidence of his crimes without anyone noticing. Furthermore, he was holding it tightly in his hands. Now, wasn't this his biggest bargaining chip? Chapter 2178. But I knew you'd reject it. Forget it, this deal doesn't count. Mu Yaja suddenly added, although I'm no longer the head of the Mu family, I still have Huan Yu's shares in my hands. It's not a problem for me to create a press release overnight. The mayor's daughter went against ethics and got pregnant before marriage. Is this headline enough? That one sentence was enough to make Song Jinghua shudder in fear. Mu Yaja smiled wickedly and pretended to get up. Song Jinghua immediately grabbed him. You can't do that. Do you have the heart to destroy Enya with your own hands? Mu Yaja asked calmly, what's there to not have the heart to do? The corners of Song Jinghua's eyes twitched fiercely. Looking at his disdainful expression, he was about to explode. However, when he turned his head and saw his disappointing daughter sitting in the other car, he suppressed the displeasure in his heart and asked patiently, when do you want it? Tomorrow. It's too rushed. I might not be able to make it. Mu Yaja smiled coldly. My patience is limited. I'll only give you 3 days. Either give me $10 million or transfer the ownership of that land under my name. After that, he waved Song Jinghua's hand away expressionlessly and got out of the car. Song Jinghua was so angry that he gritted his teeth. He felt as if his flesh was being sliced apart by this fellow. In just a few minutes, a few $100 million worth of land was in his pocket. How could he not be angry? On the way back, Yun Shishir asked curiously why Song Jinghua had called him over. Mu Yaja told her everything about their conversation. Yun Shishir was so shocked that she couldn't close her mouth. Isn't this blackmail? She spat out, flabbergasted. Mu Yaja argued, I got this land based on my own abilities. It has nothing to do with blackmail. Yun Shishir stuck out her tongue. It would be strange if it wasn't blackmail. However, Mu Yaja was also capable. He targeted Song Jinghua's weakness. If the scandal of Song Enya's premarital pregnancy was exposed, it would have a deep impact on Song Jinghua's future. On one hand, it was a project worth hundreds of millions. On the other hand, it was his more than 10 years of career. After thinking about it, Song Zhenghua naturally knew how to weigh the pros and cons and could only compromise. Although this was only one step of compromise, this deal was a huge loss. Regardless of whether Song Zhenghua gave him 10 million yuan in the end or gave him that piece of land, it would be a solution to his desperate situation. Now, the Xingyu Financial Group was short of funds. Without capital investment, many projects had stopped operating, and the company was losing money every minute. Perhaps, Mu Yaja did not care about such a small loss. But if they stagnated, they would only grow. That was why he did not stop Song Enya from going overseas for IVF. He wanted to have a backup plan in case of an emergency. Yun Shishir's mouth twitched. This man was far more scheming than she had imagined. To think that he had already prepared a contingency plan and leeway for the future predicament so long ago. It could only be said that this man's ambition had always been unimaginable. Thinking about it, Song Zhenghua must be feeling very depressed on his way home, right? Chapter 2179. Yun Shishir suddenly found it rather interesting. She did not expect that after going around in circles, he would actually gain a lot of benefits from it. Sometimes this man was quite evil. When he pampered someone, he did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. However, if he hardened his heart to trick someone, that person would probably lose all their temper. On the other end, in the car, Song Yunxi, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, kept her head lowered and tactfully kept quiet. In the back seat, Jiang Qiming hugged her daughter tenderly and kept comforting her back. Song Zhenghua, who was sitting beside her, was so angry that his face was ashen. His pair of fierce and sharp eyes stared straight ahead, and his whole person exuded an aura of an impending storm. The temporary silence in the car was more like the calm before the storm. Jiang Qiming carefully glanced at Song Zhenghua's side profile. In fact, she really wanted to know what the two of them were talking about that caused Song Zhenghua's expression to be so unsightly. However, due to his unsightly expression, she could not muster up the courage to ask. However, after a long silence, she finally could not hold it in anymore. After weighing the pros and cons, she cautiously asked, "What did you and Yaja talk about? You're not allowed to mention that jerk's name in front of me again." Song Zhenghua interrupted her in a thunderous rage. Jiang Qiming was shocked by his terrifying tone. She stared at him with widened eyes, seemingly unable to understand where his anger came from. However, seeing how angry he was, she did not dare to pursue the matter and tactfully kept her mouth shut. However, just because she did not ask, it did not mean that he would not talk about it anymore. He was full of anger and could not find a place to vent it. Her question naturally gave him an opportunity to vent. She saw him turn his flushed face abruptly, stared into her eyes, and roared furiously, "That good brother of yours is really arrogant." I tried my best to persuade him to keep his mouth shut about Enya's matter on account of our family's many years of friendship. Guess what he said though? Jiang Qiming shook her head blankly and asked in surprise, "What did he say?" At the mention of Mu Yaja, Song Enya, who was originally in a daze, finally regained some vitality. Her empty eyes also regained some focus. Song Yunxi, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, also pricked up her ears curiously. He said that if you want him to keep the secret, you have to give him a sum of hush money. The moment Song Zhenghua finished speaking, Jiang Qiming shook her head in disbelief. "Impossible. Yaja is never that kind of person. Ah, you underestimate him too much. Now, he's no longer the Mujia's lord, he's relieved of his heavy responsibility. What's the difference between him and a waste? Now, because of your disappointing daughter, he has a chance to make a fuss." "What did he say?" "He said he wanted me to give him 10 million. Otherwise, he would use the media outlets under him to publicize this matter. He really had a good plan. I have no choice but to give you the money." But he was really capable of saying 10 million. Don't you think that this kid is asking for too much? Chapter 2180. How can we come up with 10 million yuan in such a short time? Jiang Qiming muttered anxiously. At the same time, she was extremely disappointed in Mu Yaja. How could this brat make such a shocking request? 10 million yuan. Even Song Yunxi was dumbfounded. Song Enya, on the other hand, could not help but shudder when she heard this. Why did Brother Mu suddenly become so ruthless? Could it be that he really did not have any leeway for her? 10 million yuan. She suddenly felt suffocated. Before she left the country, she had secretly transferred a sum of money from Song Yunxi's bank account. That sum of money was still empty like a black hole. If she had not done such a foolish thing, she would still be able to fork out 10 million yuan. However, if she had not staked everything on this one throw and allowed that man to take advantage of her, the entire Song family would not be in such a passive state now. Does Dad know about this? Song Enya's face turned ashen. She was worried that if her father found out that she had moved this sum of money and squandered it all for the sake of IVF, would he be so angry that he would strangle her to death? At the thought of this, Song Enya trembled in fear. Jiang Qiming's mind was full of this matter, so she did not notice her daughter's abnormality for a while. She only comforted her, "Xingwu, don't worry. I'll talk to him later. On account of our sibling relationship, he won't be so ruthless." Forget it. Song Zhenghua snorted disdainfully. He has nothing now. What are you talking to him about? Sibling relationship? I think this lad has already fallen into the devil's path. He doesn't want to be the family head and actually gives up everything for a woman. Now, you're still hoping that he will acknowledge you as his sister. He doesn't care about his family now. If you talk to him, you'll only fall into his trap. After a pause, he snorted coldly with a gloomy gaze. We can choose not to give him the 10 million yuan, but he has another condition. I have a piece of golden land in my hands now, and he wants me to use my authority to give it to him for free. When Song Yunxi heard this, she immediately asked nervously, "Is it the land in the new city?" Song Zhenghua pulled a long face and didn't say anything. Song Yunxi's heart skipped a beat. Seeing that her father didn't reject it immediately, she thought that Mu Yaja must have made such a request. Tears streamed down Song Enya's face at once. She knew very well that if her father were to give this piece of land to Brother Mu for free, it would not be a matter of 10 million yuan. This piece of land was priceless. It would bring about a series of unprecedented economic benefits, and the far-reaching impact of this bidding case on his father's position was immeasurable. If everything went smoothly, it would be an unimaginable help to her father in the future. Song Yunxi asked worriedly, "Dad, are you really going to cede this land to him? What else can we do? Could it be that he could only watch as the Song family scandal was blown all over the city by this brat? I can't afford to lose face, and neither can the Song family. Your grandfather is already old, so he can't afford to lose face." Mu Yaja knew how to grasp a person's weakness. Chapter 2181. Song Zhenghua suddenly closed his eyes and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. However, he suddenly thought of something and opened his eyelids. He looked at Song Yunxi with bright eyes and asked, "Didn't I ask you to temporarily keep a bank account for me?" Before he could finish his words, Song Yunxi's mind went blank with a bang. Even Song Enya's face turned ghastly pale at once. Song Zhenghua did not notice the tacit change on the siblings' faces at all. He was focused on investigating the money in the bank account. He recalled for a moment and said in a deep voice, "I remember that there's more than 20 million in that account." Like a drowning man adrift at sea, he leaned forward and asked covetously, "Hurry up and write a check tomorrow. Do it early in the morning." "Dad?" Song Yunxi lowered her head with a pale face, not daring to make a sound. Her conflicted expression seemed to indicate that she was feeling extremely guilty and wanted to hide something in a hurry, but she could not say a word for a long time. Song Enya sized up Song Yunxi and furrowed her brows worriedly. However, she gripped her skirt uneasily and bit her red lips tightly. She bit so hard that her originally pale lips were filled with blood, as if they were about to bleed. Song Zhenghua, on the other hand, was extremely sharp. He could tell at a glance that Song Yunxi seemed to be feeling guilty about something and could not help but be a little suspicious. "Where did that money go?" Don't tell me that I asked you to keep it, and you squandered it on your own." Song Zhenghua could not help but suspect in this direction. His voice became increasingly gloomy and sharp, and there was a sense of suffocation in it. Song Yunxi clenched her fists but did not say a word. He had been carefully managing this account, But the only oversight was fatal. He had guarded against everyone but not the mole. Song Enya, on the other hand, was the mole in the family. Song Enya sized up Song Yunshi's conflicted expression. She knew that Yunshi was protecting her and was unwilling to betray her. Therefore, just as Song Jinghua was about to fly into a rage, she suddenly raised her head without hesitation and grabbed his arm. She made up her mind and confessed through gritted teeth. It's me. Song Jinghua was stunned for a moment before he exclaimed in unison, "What?" "I misappropriated that sum of money." Song Enya broke down and yelled loudly. She hugged her head tightly, almost desperately revealing the truth. "I want to carry out my plan, so I need a sum of money. Artificial insemination requires a lot of capital. Plus, to get those things, we need to sacrifice a lot of money. So I came up with the idea of money. I originally thought that this plan was foolproof and that I could fill in the gap very quickly. I miscalculated." Her words were enough to plunge Song Jinghua into an incomparably dark state. He felt the world spinning around him. When he came back to his senses, he shouted in disbelief, "Song Enya, are you crazy?" His thunderous voice even frightened the driver. His wrist trembled and he almost lost control of the car. Chapter 2182. Song Jinghua was enraged. "How dare you? How dare you embezzle that sum of money? Don't you know that it's the Gong funds?" Tears streamed down Song Enya's face as she begged in regret. "It's all my fault. I know my mistake now. If you hate me, you can scold me or hit me. I'll have no regrets even if you beat me to death. Anyway, I don't want to live anymore. I've humiliated you, Mommy, and the entire family. Why don't you strangle me to death? I know I'm wrong," sob sob sob. She started bawling her eyes out. Song Jinghua gritted his teeth in anger. Seeing his niece in such a state, he really raised his hand high to slap her. Jiang Qiming was quick to react. She shielded her daughter in her arms and stopped her in time. She broke down and said, "Jinghua, calm down. Calm down." "How can I calm down? To have such an unfilial daughter I can't. What's done is done. There's no point in saying all this. Enya already knows her mistake. I believe that she really knows her mistake and won't do such a foolish thing again. Just this once, give her one last chance, okay?" She pleaded bitterly as she hugged her daughter tightly and curled up into a ball. Song Jinghua looked at them in a daze. Suddenly, he sneered and spat out a few words with trembling lips. "Great. You two are connected by heart. You've made me inhumane, haven't you?" Jiang Qiming was so frightened that she dared not speak. With trembling hands, Song Jinghua fished out a pack of cigarettes. Just as he was about to light one up and take a few puffs to relieve his anger, he glanced at the pair of mother and daughter, who were huddled together pitifully. At the thought of Song Enya, who was not even a month old yet, he suddenly felt frustrated and threw the pack of cigarettes away. With a loud smack, the pack of cigarettes hit the windshield and slid down the dashboard before falling to the ground. Song Jinghua covered his face in despair and lowered his body. His voice was hoarse. "Enya, who will kill Daddy like this? Do you know that?" Jiang Qiming was completely stunned. Song Yunshi was also stunned. All along, her father had been indomitable and high-spirited in front of them. But now, because of Song Enya, he actually broke down and shed tears in front of them for the first time in his life. Song Enya was so scared that she did not even dare to breathe when she saw this. She felt that she had caused her father to suffer, but now that she was a sinner, there was no way she could comfort him. She could only shrink to one side. Song Yunshi's heart ached for herself and her father's heart. At the same time, her hatred for Mu Yaja deepened. It could be said that the deeper the love was, the deeper the hatred was. Her love for Mu Yaja had turned into bone-deep hatred at this moment. She hugged her shoulders and cried out in pain and helplessness, "Dad? I'm sorry. I really know I was wrong. I'll listen to whatever you say in the future." She did not ask for Song Jingwa's forgiveness. She only hoped that she would not implicate her father no matter what the price was. Song Jingwa did not make a sound as tears fell silently. He did not say a word along the way. It was obvious that his heart was heavy, so Jiang Qiming did not dare to disturb him. Chapter 2183. She was in a mess, especially her dress, which was drenched in milk. She had to change her clothes and think about the rest later. After Song Jinghua calmed down, he suddenly said, Song Enya is pregnant with Mu Yanqing's child, right? Jiang Qiming and Song Yunxi looked at each other and nodded. Now that Song Enya was no longer around, Song Jinghua lit a cigarette and took a few puffs. After a long while, he said in a deep voice, let's abort the child while it's still young and hasn't formed. Jiang Qiming was a little surprised by his decision. Abort it? What else can we do? Song Jinghua snorted in annoyance. Don't tell me we're going to give birth to this illegitimate child. Song Yunxi asked worriedly, Enya? Will Enya be willing? Since it's come to this, it's not up to her to decide on this matter. Just now, she promised me in the car that she'd listen to me on this matter. This child can't be kept. She's still unmarried. If she gives birth to this child, we won't let others make a fool of the Song family. Before the news gets out, I'll make some arrangements and find a reliable big hospital to perform an operation to abort the child. Song Jinghua's tone was so calm that it was almost cruel. At first glance, it sounded very ruthless. However, only Song Yunxi could tell that her father's tone was filled with restraint and regret. He was enduring his heartache and forcing himself to be so resolute. Indeed, if this child was kept, not only would it harm Enya, but it would also implicate the entire family's reputation. This was a step that could not be taken. I don't think we have to abort this child, right? Jiang Qiming suddenly said. Song Jinghua looked at her, but unexpectedly he did not refute her words. Instead, he asked, then, in your opinion, what should we do with this child? Jiang Qiming was a little surprised. In the past, she had never had a say in this family. However, now that Song Jinghua was actually asking for her opinion, she felt a little better. I think that having Mu Yaja's child in her stomach is better than having Mu Yaja's child. Jinghua, think about it. Now, Mu Yaja has already stepped down from his position as the head of the Mu family. I heard that he has fallen out with the Mu family. It's impossible for him to return to the Mu family. In your words, I have nothing left. However, Mu Yanqing was different. He also has some status in the Mu Jia. Although he is not the Mu Jia's patriarch, if he marries Enya, with the power of the Song family, it won't be difficult for him to become the patriarch. Perhaps he could talk to him about this matter and see what his intentions were. After all, it's his blessing that our family's Enya is compatible with him. He won't necessarily lose out. If the two families could form a marriage alliance, then when Enya's child was born, it could be said that the mother's status would rise because of her son. Perhaps, in the future, Enya can become the Mu Jia's mistress. The power of the two families balanced each other and supported each other. It could be said that both sides were seeking benefits. Mu Yanqing is a sensible child. If the situation is beneficial to him, he will definitely accept it. Song Jinghua suddenly sneered disapprovingly. Chapter 2184. Do you want me to bluntly say that this lass stole the sperm bank in order to get pregnant with Yaja's child? In the end, she made a huge mistake and ended up with his sperm. Now, she's pregnant with his child due to a freak combination of factors. Isn't this a fantasy? What is Mu Yanqing thinking about the Song family? Do you think I haven't embarrassed myself enough? Jiang Qiming hesitated to speak, but Song Jinghua continued, besides, how can you be sure that Enya is pregnant with Mu Yanqing's child? What if the child isn't Mu Yaja's? Mu Yanqing's personality isn't as calm as Mu Yaja's. If that happens, won't things get even uglier? Jiang Qiming smiled. Jinghua, don't worry about this. Before that, for insurance, I'll think of a way to secretly do another paternity test. If it's confirmed to be Mu Yanqing's child, then everyone will be happy. If it's not, then according to your opinion, let's abort the child. Song Yunxi was conflicted. Is that okay? It seems like my sister is the one who threw herself at him. Song Jinghua scoffed. Do you think your mother and I want to do this? If Enya didn't ruin herself and get pregnant for no reason, would we be in such a passive position? Song Yunshi fell silent guiltily. This suggestion of yours is not impossible. According to the news, the second in charge of the Mu family seems to have the intention of supporting Mu Yenqing. However, that old man has been busy with the company's affairs recently. After that rascal stepped down, the entire Mu group is in a mess. At this time, I'm afraid he's bitterly cleaning up the mess. I wonder how the Mu group will develop in the future. Does Mu Yenqing have the ability to take on such a heavy responsibility? However, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. No matter how bad the Mu group is, it's still the richest family in the capital. Yenqing and Enya are well matched in terms of social status. It's not a loss. Song Jinghua pondered for a moment and narrowed his eyes. I'm just afraid that we'll make the wrong bet and lose both the woman and the money. Jiang Qiming added, I've interacted with Yenqing a few times. My impression of him is that he's a humble and responsible person. He might not be as capable as Yaja, but he had a simple personality and was not as shrewd and unpredictable as Yaja. He was quite easy to control. If Enya is betrothed to him, it will be a more optimistic situation for us. The three of them suddenly fell silent. Amidst the dead silence, Song Enya changed into a new set of clothes and sat back on the sofa. Perhaps it was because Jiang Qiming had comforted her for a long time on the way home. Her emotions finally stabilized and her complexion looked better. When she went downstairs just now, she stood in the distance for a while, so she heard some of their conversation. She really did not expect that the child in her stomach would be Mu Yenqing's. But now that things had come to this, she was already disheartened. No matter what Song Jinghua suggested to her, she would not put up any resistance. Because once the heart died, it would truly die. As for her future, she did not have any expectations. She might as well go with the flow and let them arrange it. After all, she was the one who had caused this disaster. She should be responsible for it. She no longer had any thoughts about who she would marry or who she would marry. Chapter 2185. Actually, I'm not sure who the father of the child in my stomach is. Anyway, I'll listen to all of your arrangements. Song Enya stood her ground and expressed her opinion timidly. Seeing that she was so cooperative, Jiang Qiming was overjoyed. Good. Enya, you're finally a little more sensible. Don't worry, Mommy won't let you suffer. Okay, Song Jinghua suddenly said, it's decided for now. Tomorrow, find an opportunity to do a paternity test to see if the child is Mu Yenqing's. We'll discuss other matters after we get the results. Everyone reached a consensus. The next day, Mu Yenqing did not receive any calls from Meng Qingxue the entire day. Not to mention a call, he did not even receive a text message. Before he left last night, he had already made his stand clear and said that if Meng Qingxue was sensible, she would call to cater to him and agree to his arrangements. However, he did not receive any reply from Meng Qingxue until evening. He was instantly furious. He really couldn't figure out what this woman's motive was. Could it be that for a woman like her, glory and wealth were her lifelong pursuits? He wanted to give her glory and wealth. He would also allow her to give birth to the child. After the child was born, as the child's father, he would also bear the responsibility of raising and nurturing the child. If the child was well-groomed, he might have a chance to enter the Mu family legitimately. How could she turn a blind eye to such tempting conditions? He had said such harsh words. Even if she did not care for the generous treatment he had arranged for her, she should at least give him an explanation, shouldn't she? If she did not want his arrangement, she should at least report to him whether the child was staying or leaving. Mu Yenqing wanted to call her several times to question her, but when he thought of her timid expression, he could not bear to do so and suppressed the urge. As if to deliberately give her the cold shoulder, he did not disturb her until night fell. However, for some reason, the more he ignored her, the more uneasy he felt. At 9 o'clock in the evening, he went to her apartment uninvited. He knocked on the door for a long time, but no one answered. Just as he suspected that something had happened to her and was about to dial her number, the door suddenly opened. Meng Qingshue's haggard and gloomy face entered his sight. However, upon seeing his arrival, she wasn't as happy as before, nor did she look surprised. She only said coldly, "You're here." These 3 words were neither cold nor warm, and they served to accentuate her indifferent attitude. The man fumed. "You didn't call me the whole day. What does that mean? Didn't you say that if there's nothing important, I shouldn't disturb you?" she asked curiously, but it made him fall silent. He was speechless and embarrassed. He had indeed said such words, but right now he hated her thoughtfulness and gentleness. Like an unreasonable child, he shouted at her, "I told you not to disturb me, and you didn't even call me? How ridiculous!" Meng Qingshue's face turned even paler. What, wasn't he the one who was being ridiculous? "Let me in," he ordered matter-of-factly. Chapter 2186. After he walked in, Meng Qingxue stood at the door in a daze for a long time before she closed the door desolately. Mu Yanqing's sudden arrival gave her a great shock. She originally thought that this man must be angry with her, so he would not set foot here for a while. However, after not contacting him for a day, this man came to her door in a hurry at night. What is he doing? Why is he in such a hurry? Did the Mu family give him an ultimatum to clean up all the love affairs he had caused outside? Meng Qingxue caressed her lower abdomen worriedly, her heart aching terribly. If I had known, I wouldn't have told him. If she had known that he wouldn't marry her, she would have been fully prepared from the beginning. Even though this child was an accident, even if she was pregnant, she couldn't bear to abort it, so she shouldn't have been in such a hurry to tell him. At least, at such a time, even if he had declared that he would not marry her, she could have left him with dignity and dignity. She could have left quietly with the child in her stomach and not been as passive as she was now. This time, he seemed to be very stubborn. Could it be that he's planning to tie me up for an abortion? At the thought of this, Meng Qingshue's face turned even uglier. As soon as Mu Yanqing walked in, he saw the fragrant noodles on the table. It was a bucket of instant noodles. It looked like it had just been cooked, for it was still steaming hot. However, if it were Yangchun noodles, it would be fine. This bucket of instant noodles was sold at a convenience store for 4 yuan a bucket. It was just a very simple instant noodles with no nutrition at all. Was she going to eat this for dinner? Mu Yanqing was inexplicably angry. He pointed at the noodles on the table and said angrily, "You're going to eat this? Since you're pregnant, you should eat some. How can you keep up with the nutrition if you only eat instant noodles? What has it got to do with you?" Mu Yanqing said coldly, "Don't I transfer money to your account every month? If you don't use this money to buy some nutrition and supplements, how can you raise the child well if you only eat instant noodles?" Pausing for a moment, he turned around and was about to reprimand her when he saw Meng Qingxue standing behind him in silence. She bit her lower lip hard, her eyes brimming with tears. No matter how hard she tried to hold it in, her tears became more and more turbulent. One drop after another fell down her cheeks. Her pitiful look. Mu Yanqing was stunned at once. When he came back to his senses, he saw her trying to hold back her tears. Feeling impatient, he yelled at her, "Why are you crying for no reason?" Meng Qingxue did not answer him. Instead, she asked righteously, "What are you doing here for no reason?" Mu Yanqing was momentarily speechless and did not know how to answer her. Suddenly, he realized how sharp her attitude was and instantly felt somewhat displeased. "Why can't I be here? I rented this apartment. Since I rented it, it's my territory. What's wrong with me coming to my own territory?" Meng Qingxue sneered. With tears in her eyes, she raised her head stubbornly and said, "Mu Yanqing, I've already returned the apartment you rented for me previously. I earned this apartment with the money I earned from my part-time job. This is where I live, not your territory. You can't come and go as you please." Chapter 2187. This woman was actually fighting with him in all seriousness. Mu Yanqing was instantly enraged. Hence, like a stubborn and willful child, he gritted his teeth and said, "I bought the diamond and necklace you're wearing, didn't I? I also got someone to get your phone made for you, didn't I? Let's not talk about the other things in this house. Even you are mine. I've engraved a seal on your body, and the child in your stomach is also mine." Meng Qingxue flew into a rage out of humiliation. Her eyes were red as she hysterically tried to stop him from continuing. Mu Yanqing. However, Mu Yanqing ignored her and her pair of red and swollen eyes as he declared arrogantly, I even accompanied you to the mall to buy the clothes you're wearing. Tell me, other than this rental house, what else do you have that belongs to you? Meng Qingxue bit her lower lip hard as she stared at him in a daze. She was so sad that she broke into a smile. Then, right in front of him, she grabbed the ends of her clothes with both hands. Almost immediately, she deftly took them off and threw them at his face as she screamed at the top of her lungs, I'm returning them to you. I'm returning everything to you. All right. Mu Yanqing was stunned by her outburst and was momentarily at a loss as to what to do. Meng Qingxue was only wearing a piece of underwear. Apart from taking off her dress and throwing it at him, she also took off the diamond studs in her ears, the crystal necklace, and the diamond anklet and threw them all at him. Finally, he saw her suddenly turn around and walk toward the bedroom. Mu Yanqing grabbed her dress and chased after her, only to see her rummaging through the drawers and drawers. Finally, she found some expensive jewelry that he had given her in the past in a few dressing boxes. Most of them were expensive, and she had been keeping them safe all this while. She could not even bear to wear them, but now, she found them all and threw them all on the bed. What are you doing? Mu Yanqing reprimanded. Meng Qingxue, on the other hand, seemed to be deaf. In the end, she took out a passbook, a few credit cards, and a Hermes bag that Mu Yanqing had given her for her birthday last year. She threw everything on the bed. Meng Qingxue suddenly raised her head and stood in front of him. She forced herself to be more elegant and free, like a proud queen. She suddenly said, I'll return everything to you. Whether it's the passbook, the credit card, the diamonds, the jewelry, or the branded bag you gave me, I'll return everything to you. From now on, let's cut off all ties. Please don't bother me anymore. What nonsense are you talking about? I'm not talking nonsense. I'm serious. Because I've had enough. I've had enough of your arrogance and conceit. I've had enough of your indifference and heartlessness. I've had enough of being like a caged canary, watching over you with all my heart, yet being unable to obtain your true heart. I've had enough of missing you without seeing the light of day, yet you don't care about me at all. I've had enough of your self-righteousness and lack of consideration for me. What did she get for her sincerity? Chapter 2188. Meng Qingxue said with tears streaming down her face. She grabbed a diamond earring and threw it at his face. Mu Yanqing, how can you be so high and mighty? Your family background is superior. Your background is extraordinary. But it's not like I have to be trampled on by you. Let me off. From now on, you'll go your way, and I'll go mine. We'll mind our own business and mind our own business. How about this? Huh? Shut up. Mu Yanqing could not take it anymore and scolded her. You're deliberately provoking me, aren't you? Meng Qingxue was suddenly at a loss. Tears streamed down her face, and her eyes were empty as she questioned him seriously. Then, what do you want me to do? Mu Yanqing walked over and held her shoulders as he said domineeringly, Meng Qingxue, as long as you know what's good for you, you'd better take back your words and accept my arrangements obediently. Isn't that good? Don't you want to be with me? We can be together for the rest of our lives. If you become my woman, I'll give you the glory and wealth that others can only dream of. You can be like a rich madam, wear the prettiest clothes, wear the most expensive jewelry, and buy the most branded bags. I'll do everything for you. Meng Qingxue suddenly mocked him coldly, but you can't give me a status. Mu Yanqing was stunned for a moment before he suddenly said in disgust and suspicion, Meng Qingxue, I'm warning you. Don't go overboard. Don't be too greedy. Greedy? Meng Qingxue laughed out loud as if she had heard an inexplicably funny joke. Perhaps it was too funny that she laughed so hard that she teared up. She rubbed her eyes, and this sad laughter instantly turned into sobs as she sobbed. Yes, I'm greedy. I just want to be your rightful wife. I want to stand by your side openly one day. Even if I don't wear the most branded clothes or carry the most expensive bags, I'll still feel gratified and happy. This kind of thinking may be a little too extravagant for you, Mu Yanqing. You're really generous. You can give me endless glory and wealth, but you're stingy with even a basic status. I really don't know if this is something to be happy about or to find it laughable. Why are you so stubborn? Mu Yanqing hated her stubbornness. He held her shoulders tightly and forced her to sit by the bed. He then said seriously, "Do you know how long I've worked for this day? My second uncle said he's decided to help me, but before that, I have to agree to one condition. First, I have to cooperate with him. My power and status aren't that stable yet. If I want to sit on the patriarch's seat, I'm still a little lacking. If I were to marry a young lady from a big family, then it would definitely be an advantage for me. Why don't yous? Use S's. Tears streamed down Meng Qingshue's face as she said, "Yanqing, I love you. Even if you have nothing, I'll always be by your side and never leave you. I only want you. I don't care about the glory and wealth. I only want to be with you." Mu Yanqing was moved by her words. No matter who he was, his heart would soften at her words. Chapter 2189. However, even if he was touched by Meng Qingshue's unswerving devotion, he would never give up the fight for the family head position because of this. He had waited for this day for too long. Now that he had such an opportunity, how could he give it up so easily? It was not easy for him to drag Mu Yaja down from his position. If he gave up just like that, wouldn't he be paving the way for someone else? At the thought of this, Mu Yanqing regained his rationality and flung her hand away. "Impossible. I can't give up just like that." "Then, let's break up," Meng Qingxue suddenly suggested. Mu Yanqing turned around in surprise. He didn't expect that this woman would be so magnanimous and even break up with him before he did. He also didn't expect that this woman, who had always loved him with all her heart, would let him go just like that, without any reluctance at all. "You want to break up with me? Don't worry, I don't want any compensation from you. Even if it's a breakup fee, I'll return everything you've given me. I only hope that from now on, we'll cut off all ties. I won't pester you anymore, and you won't pester me anymore. Okay?" If it were in the past, Mu Yanqing would definitely suspect that this woman was playing hard to get with him. However, at this moment, when he saw the determination in Meng Qingshue's eyes, his heart suddenly trembled. This woman actually said such a sentence in an extremely serious manner. Meng Qingxue continued, "As for the child in my stomach, you don't have to worry too much about it. I won't cause you much trouble. Whether you get rid of it or keep it, it has nothing to do with me anymore. Even if this child doesn't have a father from a young age, as a mother, I'll definitely make it up to him and raise him up. I only ask that you give me the right to be a mother and stop interfering with us." "You," Meng Qingxue smiled coldly and then walked around him to the living room. She sat down on the sofa, picked up the bucket of noodles, and started eating. When Mu Yanqing returned to the living room, he saw her from afar holding a bowl of noodles and wolfing them down with tears in her eyes. It could be seen that she was starving, and her stomach was rumbling. She was no longer as fashionable and delicate as she had been when they first met. Instead, she was in dire straits. Last night, he had deliberately ignored her and left in such a carefree manner. She had not eaten anything the entire night and had cried herself to sleep. Then, she had been frightened by a nightmare and had cried herself awake. When she woke up, she kept crying. She didn't eat breakfast or lunch. She couldn't lift her spirits. No matter what she did, she was surrounded by sadness. She didn't know where her tears came from. She cried until her eyes started to hurt. She scolded herself. Why did she cry so much for an irresponsible man? However, the more she thought about it, the more she cried. She couldn't do anything well, so she didn't go for her part-time job anymore. She called for a day off and simply hid in her blanket. She cried and slept and cried, and spent the day in a daze. Therefore, as soon as he opened the door, he saw a pair of red and swollen eyes that were like walnuts. Chapter 2190. Just as she was about to eat after cooking, this man came uninvited again. After saying so much, Meng Qingxue wished she could cut open her heart and let him see it clearly, but this man seemed indifferent. Right from the beginning, what he cared about was not her or the child in her stomach, but power and wealth. Meng Qingshue's heart turned cold. She thought, instead of pestering him, why don't I just let him go? No matter what I say, he won't change his mind. She shouldn't have those illusory dreams. Mu Yanqing's heart ached when he saw her down and out. He calmed down and said to her, "Don't make yourself suffer like this. Come with me. I've arranged a nanny and bodyguard for you. Come with me and I'll settle you down. Even if you don't think about yourself, you should think about the child." Meng Qingxue ate the noodles numbly. She did not say a word, but the expression on her face seemed to say, "No need." He was deliberately giving him the cold shoulder. Later on, Mu Yanqing rambled on again, but she did not listen to a single word he said. In the end, she only heard him stomping his feet as if he was extremely angry. Then, she heard the door slam and leave. Meng Qingxue raised her head and looked at the empty house. Finally, she picked up the bowl of noodles and drank a few mouthfuls of hot soup. However, she could not tell if the salty and astringent taste was the taste of the soup or her tears. The Song family. On this day, Song Jingguo went out. Jiang Qiming seemed to have used some connections to get a few strands of Mu Yanqing's hair from a servant of the Mu family and rushed to the hospital for a DNA test. However, Song Yunxi was worried about Song Enya's condition and stayed in her room the whole day. Song Enya did not get out of bed for the whole day and even ate her meals in bed. After getting pregnant, the symptoms of pregnancy followed. Song Enya's reaction was especially severe. She vomited badly and felt weak all over. Coupled with her drowsiness, she lay in bed for the whole day. In the evening, Jiang Qiming rushed home. When she pushed open the bedroom door, she saw Song Yunxi sitting by the bed, playing games on her phone. Song Enya, on the other hand, was leaning against the headboard. Unknowingly, she had woken up and was staring blankly at the ceiling. "Enya, the DNA test report is out, and it's confirmed that you're carrying Mu Yanqing's child." Jiang Qiming said happily, only to see Song Enya lowering her head dejectedly and letting out a long sigh as tears streamed down her cheeks. Before this, she actually had some hope. Even if it was Mu Yaja's child, it would be fine. She would rather this was Mu Yaja's child and then abort the child because it meant that what Mu Yaja said last night was just to scare her. She didn't expect him to really use tricks to swap the sperm. This meant that this man's coldness was real. His heartlessness towards her was also real. She had loved him for more than 10 years. She had loved him so miserably, but in the end, she had been played in the palm of his hand. This knowledge almost destroyed her. Liar. She mumbled through gritted teeth, full of humiliation. Chapter 2191. "But why are you doing this to me?" Song Enya roared as she covered herself with the blanket and cried uncontrollably. Jiang Qiming's heart ached for her daughter, but she was also angry. Her heart ached for her daughter's downfall and helplessness, but she was even angrier at her stubbornness. "Enya, isn't it great that you're pregnant with Mu Yanqing's child? Compared to Yaja, Mu Yanqing is now in high demand. If this child works hard and becomes the head of the Mu family, then you'll definitely be the matriarch of the Mu family in the future. Although things are a little complicated, it's still a lucky hit. Carrying Mu Yaja's child is better than carrying Mu Yaja's child." Song Yunxi stayed at the side and did not say a word. Song Enya, on the other hand, did not make a sound. She hid under the blanket and saw a bulging figure, which seemed to be secretly crying, trembling slightly. She walked over and comforted her. "Enya, don't be too sad. Think about it. It's very important for a woman to choose the right husband in her life. Marriage is a second reincarnation for a woman. As long as she's chosen well, she'll have a lifetime of happiness. Besides, Yanqing is quite outstanding. He's gentler than Yaja. If you work hard, he'll definitely treat you like a treasure and dote on you. But what about Mu Yaja? Could it be that you still haven't thought it through and are still thinking about that lad? He's no longer the head of the Mu family, so life won't be easy for him. You'll only implicate yourself and suffer if you're with him. I know that you have deep feelings for him, but can feelings be eaten? Mom also admits that Yaja is very outstanding and extraordinarily handsome, but now that he's down and out, Mu Yanqing and him are like heaven and earth. A fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. Women naturally have to be more open-minded and know how to treat themselves better. Of course, men are also accepted based on merit. Mu Yanqing isn't bad. Jiang Qiming tried her best to persuade Song Enya before she finally stopped crying and calmed down a little. This child was Song Enya's only hope. With this child in her arms, perhaps the Song family could rise again with the help of the Mu family. Song Yunxi added, "Enya, just give up on Uncle Mu. By treating you like this, it's obvious that he doesn't care about you at all. He even used such a method to scheme against you. What's worse is that he even used your innocence to threaten father and the Song family. What's the point of thinking about such a vile man? I can't accept this." Song Enya gritted her teeth. "I can't take this lying down. How am I inferior to that woman?" Last night, she had clearly thought it through, but when she woke up and looked at the bright sun outside the window, it couldn't shine into her heart. Thinking back, she felt that Mu Yaja had done her in. Yes, she had schemed and plotted a lot. In order to be with the person she loved, she had indeed used dirty methods. But that was for the sake of loving him. She had never had any thoughts of harming him. When she thought about the artificial insemination because her body was too weak, the failure rate of artificial insemination was too high. She would rather suffer more and use test tube babies. After much difficulty, she finally got pregnant. But in the end, what was the result? In the end, she was ruthlessly toyed with by the man she loved. This feeling was so painful that it was as if a knife was stabbing her heart and making her bleed. Chapter 2192. Right now, her hatred was bone and flesh. She loved, hated, and was infatuated with Mu Yaja, but in the end, she felt more like a lively clown. In the end, all her efforts were in vain and she ended up as a joke. She had been on tenterhooks all this while, yet she ended up in such a state? Song Enya's heart was twisted, and she could not let it go. My daughter is so outstanding. It's clearly his fault. Daughter, let it go. Jiang Qiming comforted her gently. Song Enya gritted her teeth for a while before she felt a little better. Brother Mu, just you wait. One day, I'll make you pay for all the humiliation you've given me today. That night, Song Jinghua came back from a dinner party with a worried frown. Jiang Qiming had just coaxed her daughter, but when she saw him looking gloomy and absent-minded, she could not help feeling worried. Jinghua, what's wrong with you? You don't look good. Did you go to the hospital today? He did not answer his mother's question and asked directly. Jiang Qiming nodded. I did 2 tests, and the results showed that they're both Mu Yanqing's children. Song Jinghua was not happy about this, though. Instead, he said worriedly, Today, I heard from a source that the Muse don't seem to know about this. Enya did a good job with this matter, so not many people know about it. It's only natural that the Muse don't know about it. That's not the problem. Song Jinghua suddenly glanced at her from the corner of his eyes and said, Mu Linfeng intends to arrange a marriage for Mu Yanqing. Do you know about this? Jiang Qiming was stunned as if she had been struck by lightning. A marriage alliance? Yes. I heard that they've already started looking for one, but I heard that Mu Linfeng is quite interested in the Lin's 3,000 gold ingots. Lin Shuya? Yes. Jiang Qiming's expression gradually turned ugly as she said worriedly, The Lins are an impressive and prestigious family. Lin Shuya comes from a good family background. Not only is she well educated, but she's also the most doted on in the Lins. It's not surprising that Mu Linfeng has chosen her. But what about Enya? Song Jinghua frowned and said, I'm thinking about that too. Jiang Qiming suggested, Why don't we have a chat with Yanchen? There's no need to rush. The third daughter of the Lin family was very arrogant. If it were Mu Yaja, it would be fine, but she might not take a liking to Mu Yanqing. We can't rush this matter. Otherwise, the Song family will lose face. Then, let's endure it for the time being and act according to the circumstances. Is that what you mean? Song Jinghua nodded and suddenly asked with concern, How's Enya's mood? It's not stable at all. I've thought things through, but I can't get over the hurdle in my heart for the time being. Jiang Qiming suddenly thought of something and asked nervously, What about that matter? The thing you promised Yaja yesterday. Hush, money. Song Jingwa's face darkened, then he sighed and shook his head helplessly. Since he wants that piece of land, let's give it to him. Other than that, I can't think of any other way. This time, we'll let him get away with it for the time being. Is this really okay? That piece of land is worth a fortune. It can't be measured with money.